The moment Lily Stanton realized the three men weren't there for dinner, she had exactly 12 minutes to prevent a murder. In a crowded Chicago restaurant on an ordinary Friday night, a waitress with a psychology degree spotted what trained assassins thought they'd hidden perfectly. One warning, one whisper, one choice that would drag her from serving tables into the blood-soaked underworld of organized crime. This is the story of how saving a stranger's life cost Lily everything she knew and gave her everything she never imagined. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story reaches. Hit that like button and let's begin. The fluorescent lights of Marcello's Italian restaurant cast their usual warm glow over the Friday night crowd, but Lily Stanton felt the cold creep of recognition running down her spine. She'd been a waitress here for 3 years, long enough to know the difference between hungry customers and men with different appetites entirely. The first one had walked in at 10:47 p.m., dark jacket, unremarkable face, the kind of person you'd forget within minutes of passing on the street. He'd requested a table near the window with a clear view of the dining room. Nothing unusual about that, except Lily had noticed how his eyes swept the restaurant in one practiced motion before he sat down, cataloging exits, counting staff, measuring distances. Old habits died hard. Her degree in criminal psychology might be gathering dust in a drawer at her studio apartment, but the training remained sharp as broken glass in her mind. The second man arrived 8 minutes later. Different build, different clothes, same predatory stillness beneath the civilian disguise. He chose a booth along the far wall, positioning himself with a clear sightline to the window table. The angle was too perfect, too calculated. Lily's pulse quickened as she delivered bread to table 7, her mind already running probabilities. 2 men, strategic positioning, both arriving within minutes of each other. Coincidence? In a city like Chicago, coincidence was just another word for naivety. The third man confirmed her worst fears. He entered at 11:02 p.m., moving with the relaxed confidence of someone completely comfortable in his skin. He didn't scan for exits or measure distances. He simply walked to the bar, ordered a whiskey neat, and settled onto his stool with the casual authority of a regular, except Lily had never seen him before in her life. From his position at the bar, he could see everything: the window table, the booth, and most importantly, table 12, where Ethan Blackwood sat alone with his tablet, an untouched glass of Macallan 18. Lily's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her serving tray. 3 points of a triangle, each vertex anchored by a man who didn't belong, all converging on the one customer who'd been coming here every Friday for the past 6 months. Ethan Blackwood. Wealthy, polite, generous with his tips, and punctual to an almost obsessive degree. He arrived at 10:30 p.m. every Friday without fail, ordered the same meal, ossobuco with a side of roasted vegetables, and departed at exactly 11:45 p.m. Lily could set her watch by his routine. She'd always found him unsettling, though she couldn't articulate exactly why. There was something about the way he carried himself, the careful precision of his movements, the way his pale gray eyes seemed to calculate everything they touched. He was handsome in that austere way some men were: sharp cheekbones, dark hair graying at the temples, expensive suits that probably cost more than she made in 3 months. But tonight, watching him through the lens of the 3 strangers' attention, Lily saw him differently. She saw what they saw: a target. "Lily, table 4 needs water," Marco called from behind the bar, snapping her back to the present. "On it," she replied automatically, grabbing a pitcher. As she moved through the dining room, Lily's mind raced through possibilities. Call the police? And tell them what? That 3 men were sitting in a restaurant? That her psychology degree gave her a bad feeling? The Chicago PD would laugh her off the phone. Warn Ethan? He'd probably think she was crazy. Or worse, he'd dismiss her entirely, the way wealthy men often dismissed service workers who stepped outside their prescribed roles. But what if she was right? What if something terrible was about to happen and she did nothing? The question crystallized when she glanced at the man in the window booth. He'd been checking his phone obsessively for the past 5 minutes, and now she saw why. The screen displayed a simple message that made her blood run cold. 11:45, parking lot, green light. 11:45. Ethan's departure time, Lily's psychology training kicked into overdrive, analyzing behavioral patterns and threat assessment models she'd studied years ago. The positioning was classic surveillance. 3 points of observation ensuring the target couldn't move without being tracked. The timing wasn't random. They were waiting for something specific. Ethan's routine had made him predictable, and predictability was a weapon in the wrong hands. She checked the clock above the bar. 11:23 p.m. 22 minutes until Ethan would stand, leave his customary generous tip, and walk out into the Chicago night where 3 men were coordinating something she desperately hoped she was wrong about. But Lily knew she wasn't wrong. Years of studying criminal behavior had taught her to trust the patterns, and this pattern screamed danger in a language only she seemed to hear. "You look pale," said Carmen, another waitress, as they crossed paths near the kitchen. "You feeling okay?" "Yeah, just long shift," Lily managed, forcing a smile. Carmen squeezed her shoulder sympathetically and moved on, completely oblivious to the silent drama unfolding across the dining room. Lily delivered water to table 4 on autopilot, her gaze constantly returning to Ethan. He seemed completely unaware of the attention fixed on him, absorbed in whatever work occupied his tablet screen. His osso buco sat half-eaten, the Macallan untouched as always. He never drank it, just ordered it like a ritual he couldn't break. The man at the bar checked his phone again. The one in the booth shifted position slightly, adjusting his angle of view. The one by the window remained perfectly still, a spider waiting at the center of its web. 11:28 p.m. Lily made a decision. It might cost her job. Ethan might think she was insane, but she'd spent 4 years studying criminal psychology, writing papers on threat assessment and behavioral analysis, before the practicalities of student loans and rent had driven her into food service. That education might not have led to a career, but it had given her skills, and those skills were screaming at her to act. She grabbed a clean water glass, filled it from the pitcher, and walked toward table 12 with as much casual confidence as she could manufacture. Ethan didn't look up as she approached. His fingers moved across the tablet screen with practiced efficiency, reviewing what looked like financial reports or spreadsheets, the kind of boring business documents that wealthy men examined in expensive restaurants. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackwood," Lily said softly, setting the water glass on his table. His eyes lifted, and for a moment she saw something flicker across his expression. Surprise, maybe, that she knew his name. Of course she knew his name. She'd served him every Friday for half a year. The reservation was always under Blackwood, and he always paid with a Black American Express card embossed with Ethan J. Blackwood. "Yes?" His voice was smooth, cultured, with the faintest trace of a British accent that came and went depending on his mood. Lily glanced around, making sure no one was close enough to overhear. Then she leaned down slightly, as if checking that his meal was satisfactory. "Don't react to what I'm about to tell you," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's ambient noise. "There are 3 men watching you, window table, back booth, and the bar. They've been coordinating on their phones. I overheard one of them mention 11:45, your usual departure time. I think they're planning something." For a long moment, Ethan didn't move, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge her words in any visible way. Then slowly he reached for his water glass, the one she'd just placed on the table, and took a measured sip. "You have excellent observational skills," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "What's your name?" Lily Stanton." "Lily." He tested the name as if committing it to memory. "Tell me, are you always this attentive to your customers?" "I have a degree in criminal psychology," she replied, still keeping her voice low. "I know what surveillance looks like." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a subtle recalculation, like he was reassessing everything he thought he knew about the woman who'd been serving him osso buco every Friday for 6 months. "Interesting career path," he murmured, "from criminal psychology to waitressing." "Student loans don't pay themselves," Lily said tersely. "Look, I know this sounds crazy, but I'm not wrong. Those men are professionals. Whatever they're planning—" "I believe you," Ethan interrupted gently. The simple statement knocked the wind from Lily's prepared arguments. She'd expected skepticism, dismissal, maybe even anger at the interruption. She hadn't expected immediate acceptance. "You believe me?" "Implicitly." Ethan set down his water glass and casually reached into his jacket pocket. For one terrible moment, Lily thought he was reaching for a weapon, but he extracted only his phone, a sleek device with a black case. "How many exits does this restaurant have?" "3," Lily replied automatically. "Front entrance, kitchen delivery door, and emergency exit by the restrooms." "And the parking lot? How many ways out?" "2 main exits onto different streets, plus the alley behind the kitchen." Ethan nodded, his fingers moving across his phone screen with the same efficiency he displayed on his tablet. "The man at the bar, what's he drinking?" "Whiskey neat, Maker's Mark." "Has he taken more than one sip?" Lily thought back, replaying the past 20 minutes in her mind. "No, the glass is still full." Observant and accurate. Ethan's lips curved into something that might have been a smile under different circumstances. "You're wasted as a waitress, Lily Stanton." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, typed a rapid response, then looked back at her with those unsettling gray eyes. "In approximately 90 seconds, things are going to happen very quickly. I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" "I don't even know you," Lily protested. "You know enough to risk your job warning me about a threat you have no obligation to involve yourself in," Ethan countered. "That tells me you have good instincts. Trust them now. When things start, get behind the bar and stay down. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." "What things? What's going to—" The front door of Marcello's opened, and 2 men walked in. They weren't dressed like the others. These 2 wore suits that screamed security, complete with earpieces and the telltale bulk of shoulder holsters barely concealed beneath expensive fabric. The man at the bar noticed them immediately. His hand moved toward his jacket, an emotion that Lily's trained eye recognized as reaching for a weapon. Everything happened at once. Ethan's hand shot across the table, gripping Lily's wrist with surprising strength and pulling her down just as the man at the bar stood and pulled a gun. The 2 men in suits moved with inhuman speed, drawing their own weapons as they advanced. The man in the window booth was already on his feet, his hand inside his jacket. "Down! Everyone down!" one of the suited men shouted. The restaurant erupted into chaos. Customers screamed, diving under tables or running for the exits. Carmen dropped her tray with a spectacular crash of shattering glass. Marco ducked behind the bar, yelling something in rapid Italian, but Lily couldn't move. Ethan still had her wrist, keeping her pressed against the side of the table, shielding her with his body as the situation spiraled into violence. The man from the booth pulled his gun, but one of the suited men was already there, striking his wrist with precision that sent the weapon skittering across the floor. The impact sounded like breaking wood. The man at the bar got off one shot, a deafening crack that sent plaster raining down from the ceiling, before the second suited man tackled him, slamming him against the bar with enough force to crack the wooden surface. The man from the window table tried to run, but 2 more men, these ones dressed in casual clothes that had concealed them among the restaurant's regular customers, blocked the exit and forced him to the ground with professional efficiency. It was over in less than 30 seconds. Lily's ears rang from the gunshot, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The restaurant had descended into terrified silence, broken only by the sound of someone crying and the sharp commands of the men in suits as they secured the 3 would-be attackers. Ethan released her wrist and stood with that same unhurried calm he always displayed, as if people hadn't just tried to kill him in a crowded restaurant. "You can stand up now," he said gently, offering her his hand. Lily stared at that hand, perfectly manicured, adorned with a platinum ring that probably cost more than her car, and understood with crystal clarity that everything she thought she knew about Ethan Blackwood had been a carefully constructed lie. She took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet on legs that felt like water. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Exactly who I appear to be," Ethan replied, straightening his tie with his free hand. "A businessman, just not the kind who conducts business in boardrooms." One of the suited men approached, speaking to Ethan in a voice too low for Lily to hear. Ethan nodded, replied with something equally quiet, then turned back to her. "The police will be here soon," he said. "When they take your statement, tell them the truth about what you observed. Don't mention our conversation. As far as anyone knows, you were simply serving customers when armed men attempted a robbery." "A robbery?" Lily repeated incredulously. "Those men were here for you specifically. I saw—" "What you saw," Ethan interrupted smoothly, was 3 men attempting to rob a restaurant who were subdued by my security detail. That's the story. That's what everyone here will tell the police, including you. It wasn't a request. The steel beneath his polite words was unmistakable. Lily pulled her hand from his grip. You're a criminal. I'm a businessman, Ethan corrected. The distinction is more semantic than you might think. Those men were going to kill you. Yes. And this, she gestured at the suited men now zip-tying the 3 attackers. This is normal for you? More common than I'd prefer, Ethan admitted, which is why your warning was so valuable. You may have saved my life tonight, Lily Stanton. Before she could respond, the first police sirens became audible in the distance. Ethan glanced toward the front windows, then back at her. I'm going to leave now before the authorities arrive. My lawyers will handle the necessary statements, but I want you to know that I don't forget debts, especially ones of this magnitude. He reached into his wallet and extracted not money, but a business card, heavy stock, embossed with simple text, Ethan J. Blackwood, and a phone number. Nothing else. No company name, no address, no email. If you ever need anything, he said, pressing the card into her hand, call that number. Anytime, day or night. You'll find me remarkably capable of solving problems. I don't want anything from you, Lily said, but her fingers closed around the card anyway. You say that now. Ethan's expression softened slightly, something almost like regret crossing his features. But you warned me tonight, which means you're the kind of person who acts when she sees danger. That quality tends to attract trouble. When it does, remember, you have options. The sirens were getting louder. Ethan's security team was already moving toward the kitchen exit, the 3 subdued attackers being herded along with professional efficiency that spoke of long practice. Wait, Lily called as Ethan turned to follow them. Why do you come here? Every Friday, same time, same table? If you're what I think you are, why make yourself so predictable? Ethan paused, glancing back over his shoulder. Because routine is comforting, and comfort is a luxury in my line of work. Also, Marcello makes the best osso buco in Chicago. Some things are worth the risk. Then he was gone, disappearing through the kitchen with his security detail while Lily stood alone in the chaos of the dining room, a business card burning like hot coal in her palm. The police arrived 3 minutes later. Detective Sarah Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with the weary competence of someone who'd seen too much, took Lily's statement while EMTs checked her for injuries she didn't have. Lily told the truth, as Ethan had instructed. She described the 3 men, their positioning, their coordination. She explained how she'd noticed them acting suspiciously, though she carefully omitted the part where she'd warned Ethan directly. According to her statement, Ethan's security detail had simply been very alert to the threat. These security guys, Detective Morrison said, reviewing her notes. You get names? No, Lily replied honestly. Everything happened so fast. And Mr. Blackwood? He left before we arrived? Yes. Right after the shooting stopped. Morrison's expression suggested she didn't entirely believe the official story, but she also seemed unsurprised by it. You know what kind of business Mr. Blackwood is in? He never said, I'm just a waitress. He's just a customer. Right. Morrison closed her notebook. Just a customer who happens to have a team of armed security guards eating dinner nearby. Very normal. I don't know anything about his business, Lily said, which was technically true. She suspected, but suspicion wasn't knowledge. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Look, Ms. Stanton, I've been a cop in this city for 23 years. I know the difference between civilians and people who run in certain circles. You seem like a smart woman, so I'm going to give you some advice. Whatever Mr. Blackwood offered you tonight, a reward, a job, a favor, turn it down. Men like him, they're charming and they're generous, but they're also dangerous. The kind of dangerous that gets people hurt. He didn't offer me anything, Lily said, the business card hidden in her apron pocket feeling heavier with each passing second. Then keep it that way. Morrison handed her a card of her own, plain white, standard police issue. You think of anything else, you call me. Day or night. 2 business cards in one night, Lily thought distantly, both offering help, both representing different kinds of danger. The restaurant closed early, Marco sending everyone home with assurances that they'd still be paid for the full shift. Lily collected her things from the staff room in a daze, her mind struggling to process everything that had happened. Carmen caught up with her in the parking lot. "Hey, you okay? That was fucking insane." "Yeah," Lily said automatically. "I'm okay." "Those guys, the ones with guns, did you see them before the shooting started?" Lily hesitated, then nodded. "I noticed them acting strange. That's why I was going to tell Marco, but everything happened so fast." Carmen shuddered. "We could have been killed, all of us. Jesus, Lily, we could have died tonight." The reality of it hit Lily like a physical blow. Carmen was right. If things had gone differently, if Ethan's security hadn't been so prepared, if the shooting had started just a few seconds earlier when the dining room was more crowded. "But we didn't," Lily said firmly, as much to convince herself as Carmen. "We're okay. We're safe." "Yeah." Carmen didn't sound convinced. "I think I need a drink. You want to come to Murphy's? Half the staff is heading there." "Thanks, but I'm exhausted. I just want to go home." They hugged briefly, then separated to their respective cars. Lily sat in her old Honda Civic for several minutes before starting the engine, staring at nothing while her hands trembled on the steering wheel. A criminal. Ethan Blackwood was a criminal. Not just any criminal, but the kind who had a professional security detail and enemies willing to attempt assassination in a crowded restaurant. And she'd warned him. She'd stepped into that world voluntarily, with full knowledge of what she was doing. Lily pulled the business card from her pocket, studying it under the parking lot's sodium lights. Such a simple thing, just a name and a number. But she understood what it represented, an open door into a world she'd only studied from the safety of academic distance. She should throw it away. Detective Morrison was right. Men like Ethan Blackwood were dangerous, and getting involved with them was a mistake that could cost everything. But she didn't throw it away. Instead, she carefully tucked it into her wallet, behind her driver's license, where it wouldn't get damaged. Just in case, she told herself. Just in case of what? She couldn't articulate. But the card felt important, like a talisman or a loaded gun, something you hoped you'd never need but kept within reach anyway. Lily drove home through the late-night Chicago streets, her mind replaying the evening's events in obsessive detail, the way Ethan had believed her immediately. The calm in his eyes even as armed men moved to attack him. The professional efficiency of his security team. The complete lack of surprise on his face when violence erupted around him. This wasn't new to him. This was his normal. Her studio apartment felt too quiet after the chaos of the restaurant. Lily made chamomile tea she didn't drink, took a shower that didn't make her feel clean, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling while her mind refused to settle. She'd saved a man's life tonight. A dangerous man. Maybe even an evil man by conventional standards. But when she'd seen the threat converging on table 12, she hadn't thought about ethics or morality. She'd just seen a human being in danger and acted on instinct. Was that wrong? Should she have let events unfold without interference? Lily didn't know. Her degree had taught her about criminal behavior, but it hadn't prepared her for the moral complexity of real-world situations where the lines between right and wrong blurred into shapes she didn't recognize. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from her younger sister, Maya. "Heard about the shooting at your restaurant. Are you okay?" News traveled fast. Lily typed a quick response. "I'm fine. Nobody hurt, just scary. Love you." Maya's reply came instantly. "Thank God, Mom's freaking out. Call her tomorrow?" "Will do." Lily set the phone aside, already dreading the conversation with her mother. Catherine Stanton would want every detail, would probably insist Lily quit her job, would definitely invoke a litany of "I told you so" about working in the city instead of moving back to the suburbs where it was safe. Except tonight had proven that safety was an illusion. Danger could walk through any door, sit at any table, wear any face. Ethan Blackwood had seemed perfectly harmless for 6 months, just another wealthy businessman with predictable habits. Until he wasn't. Sleep came eventually, though it brought dreams of gunshots and gray eyes and business cards that burned to ash in her hands. Lily woke to her phone ringing at 8:47 a.m., unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something, curiosity, instinct, or simple exhaustion, made her accept the call. "Hello?" Ms. Stanton, this is James Chen from Blackwood Enterprises. The voice was professional, crisp, entirely businesslike. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Blackwood to confirm that you're unharmed after last night's incident. Lily sat up, suddenly wide awake. I'm fine. How did you get this number? Mr. Blackwood is very resourceful, Chen replied smoothly. He also asked me to inform you that your assistance will not be forgotten and to extend an invitation for lunch this afternoon should your schedule permit. 1 o'clock at the Sterling Room. A car can be arranged if transportation is needed. The Sterling Room. Lily knew the name, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, the kind of place that required reservations months in advance and had a dress code stricter than most weddings. I have to work, she said automatically. Mr. Blackwood has already spoken with your employer. You've been given the day off, with pay. The invitation is entirely optional, of course, but Mr. Blackwood would consider it a personal favor if you would accept. Lily's mind raced. This was wrong. She should decline, should maintain the distance that Detective Morrison had advised, should treat last night as an isolated incident and move on with her life. But she was curious, dangerously, irresponsibly curious. What does he want? She asked. To express his gratitude properly, Chen replied, and perhaps to discuss opportunities that might interest someone with your particular skills. I'm a waitress. You're a woman with a degree in criminal psychology who successfully identified and assessed a coordinated threat that professional security missed until you brought it to their attention, Chen corrected gently. Mr. Blackwood values competence, Ms. Stanton. He'd like to discuss how that competence might be better utilized. A job offer. He was offering her a job. In what capacity, Lily couldn't imagine, but the implication was clear. I need to think about it, she said. Of course, the invitation remains open until 12:30 p.m. If you choose to attend, a car will be waiting outside your building at 12:15. If not, Mr. Blackwood will understand and respect your decision. No pressure, no obligation. The call ended before Lily could respond. She stared at her phone, her heart pounding with the same adrenaline rush she'd felt last night when she'd first noticed the three men. This was a threshold. She could feel it with the same certainty she'd felt when identifying the threat at Marcello's. Accept the invitation, and her life would change in ways she couldn't predict. Decline, and things would return to normal. Or as normal as they could be after witnessing an attempted assassination. Lily looked at her apartment. One room, barely 400 square feet, with a kitchenette that didn't deserve the name and a bathroom where the shower took 5 minutes to produce hot water. She looked at her laptop, displaying the student loan payment portal where the balance never seemed to decrease no matter how much she paid. She looked at her closet, where her best professional clothes hung unused since graduating 3 years ago, relics of a career that never materialized. This was her life. Safe, predictable, going nowhere slowly. Ethan Blackwood was offering her something different, something dangerous, probably illegal, definitely morally complicated, but also something that would use the education she'd worked so hard for that would challenge her in ways serving Ossobuco never could. Detective Morrison's warning echoed in her mind. Men like him, they're charming and they're generous, but they're also dangerous. Lily checked the time, 9:03 a.m. 3 hours and 12 minutes to decide whether to step through the door Ethan Blackwood had opened or close it forever. She made coffee, took another shower, put on her best dress, a simple black number she'd bought for job interviews that never led anywhere. She did her makeup carefully, styled her hair, looked at herself in the mirror, and barely recognized the woman staring back. At 12:10 p.m., Lily stood by her building's entrance, her phone in one hand and Detective Morrison's card in the other. She could still call, could still choose safety over curiosity, predictability over risk. At 12:15 p.m., a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The driver, a man in a suit that screamed professional security, stepped out and opened the rear door. Ms. Stanton? Lily took a deep breath, pocketed both cards, Morrison's and Ethan's, and made her choice. Yes, she said, and climbed into the car. The Mercedes moved through Chicago's streets with the smooth confidence of a vehicle that had never known traffic jams or red lights. Lily sat in the back seat, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling, watching the city transform from her familiar neighborhood to the gleaming towers of the financial district. The driver hadn't spoken since confirming her identity. Professional silence, the kind that suggested he'd been trained to see nothing, hear nothing, remember nothing. Lily wondered how many other passengers he'd transported into Ethan Blackwood's world, and how many of them had gotten back out. The Sterling Room occupied the top floor of a building so expensive it didn't bother advertising its address. The Mercedes pulled into an underground garage where a valet materialized instantly, opening Lily's door before she could reach for the handle herself. "Miss Stanton," the valet said, as if her name had been tattooed on his brain that morning. "Please follow me." They took a private elevator that required a keycard to operate. The interior was all polished brass and mirrors, reflecting Lily's nervous face back at her from multiple angles. She looked composed, professional, nothing like the terrified waitress who'd hidden behind a bar 12 hours ago while gunfire echoed through a restaurant. The elevator opened directly into the Sterling Room's entrance, where a woman in an immaculate gray suit waited with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Miss Stanton, welcome. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you. This way, please." The restaurant was nearly empty. Intentionally, Lily suspected. A few tables held couples engaged in quiet conversation, but most of the space remained unused, creating an atmosphere of exclusive privacy that money couldn't simply buy. It had to be arranged, negotiated, guaranteed. Ethan sat at a corner table with a view of the Chicago skyline that probably added $1,000 to the bill. He stood as Lily approached, and she was struck again by how perfectly ordinary he looked in his custom suit. Just another wealthy businessman enjoying an expensive lunch. Nothing to suggest the violence that orbited him like dark planets around a darker sun. "Lily," he said warmly, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't certain you would." His handshake was firm but brief, releasing her before the contact could become uncomfortable. He waited until she'd sat before returning to his own chair, a gesture of old-fashioned courtesy that seemed anachronistic from a man who employed armed security teams. "I almost didn't," Lily admitted, deciding that honesty was safer than pretense. "Detective Morrison gave me some advice about staying away from you." "Detective Morrison is an intelligent woman," Ethan replied, amusement flickering across his features. "You should probably take her advice." "Then why am I here?" "Because you're curious." Ethan signaled to a waiter who appeared instantly with menus and a bottle of wine Lily suspected cost more than her monthly rent. And because curiosity is more powerful than common sense, especially in people with analytical minds, you want to understand what you witnessed last night. The psychology student in you can't resist. He wasn't wrong, and they both knew it. Lily accepted the menu without looking at it, her attention fixed on the man across from her. "What do you want from me?" she asked bluntly. "Lunch, to start. The scallops here are exceptional." Ethan opened his own menu with casual ease. "After that, a conversation about your future. But first, food. I find negotiations proceed better on a full stomach." The waiter returned, and Ethan ordered for both of them with the confidence of someone who'd memorized the menu long ago. Lily didn't protest. She was too busy analyzing him, cataloging details the way her psychology professors had taught her. His suit was bespoke. Probably Savile Row. The watch on his wrist was understated but clearly expensive. She recognized the Patek Philippe logo. His hands showed no calluses or scars, the hands of someone who gave orders rather than executed them personally. But there was a tension in his shoulders that suggested constant vigilance, and his eyes tracked every movement in the restaurant with practiced awareness. "You're studying me," Ethan observed, settling back in his chair. "What conclusions have you drawn?" "That you're very good at seeming harmless," Lily replied. "The suit, the manners, the expensive restaurant, it's all armor, camouflage. You want people to see a successful businessman, not whatever you actually are." "And what do you think I actually am?" "Dangerous. Connected to organized crime, probably high level given the resources you command. The security team last night wasn't improvised. They were too professional, too coordinated, which means you live under constant threat, but you've normalized it to the point where you can sit in a restaurant every Friday at the same time, eating the same meal, because routine gives you a sense of control in a chaotic existence." Ethan's smile widened slightly. "You really did study psychology." 4 years at Northwestern, graduated summa cum laude, for all the good it's done me. The bitterness in her voice surprised even Lily. Why waitressing? Ethan asked. With your credentials, you could have pursued law enforcement, FBI, corporate security consulting. Why serve osobuco to strangers? The wine arrived, giving Lily a moment to consider her answer. The waiter poured with ceremonial precision, then vanished as silently as he'd appeared. Student loans, Lily said finally. $60,000 worth. My scholarships covered tuition, but not living expenses. I took out loans to survive, thinking I'd pay them back easily once I had a career. Except the career never materialized. Every agency I applied to wanted experience I didn't have, or connections I couldn't provide, or security clearances that took months to process. I waited tables to pay rent while I searched for something better. 3 years later, I'm still waiting tables. The debt hasn't shrunk, and the degree on my wall might as well be decorative. Ethan listened with an intensity that suggested genuine interest rather than polite attention. You're overqualified for food service and underqualified for positions that would actually use your education. A common trap for millennials, I understand. Is this the part where you offer me a job? Lily asked, defensive armor sliding into place. Because I'm not interested in being a criminal. What makes you think I'd offer you a criminal position? Because everything about you screams organized crime. The security, the enemies, the way the police treated last night's incident like an inconvenient formality rather than attempted murder. You're connected, protected, and powerful enough that normal rules don't apply to you. Astute observations, all correct, Ethan acknowledged. But you're making an assumption about the nature of the work I'd propose. Their first course arrived. Scallops seared to perfection, accompanied by microgreens and a sauce Lily couldn't identify but tasted like concentrated sunshine. She ate mechanically, her mind focused on the conversation rather than the food. What kind of work? She asked. Ethan cut into his scallop with surgical precision. I operate several legitimate businesses. Import-export, real estate, private equity. These businesses require personnel with strong analytical skills, the ability to read people and situations accurately, and most importantly, discretion. Last night, you demonstrated all 3 qualities. You identified a threat my own security team missed until too late. You assessed the situation correctly, made a decision under pressure, and delivered your warning with remarkable composure. Those are valuable skills. But you're not offering me a job in import-export, Lily said. You're offering me something that requires the same skills but operates in the shadows of your legitimate businesses. I'm offering you a consulting position, Ethan corrected. You would analyze potential business partners, assess threats, provide psychological profiles of individuals I need to understand. Think of it as corporate due diligence with a more comprehensive scope. You mean you want me to tell you which of your criminal associates are planning to betray you? I want you to tell me which of my business associates, criminal or otherwise, are trustworthy, which are liabilities, and which are actively dangerous. The skill set is identical to what you'd use in corporate security, just applied to a different client base. Lily set down her fork, her appetite evaporating. You're asking me to use my education to help criminals operate more efficiently. I'm asking you to use your education in a position that pays $200,000 annually, with full benefits, student loan repayment assistance, and the opportunity to actually practice the skills you spent 4 years developing. Ethan's tone remained calm, factual, delivering information rather than making a sales pitch. What you choose to do with that opportunity is your decision. $200,000. The number hit Lily like a physical blow. That was more than quadruple her current income, enough to eliminate her student debt in a year, enough to actually build a life instead of merely surviving one. Why me? She asked quietly. You could hire experienced profilers, retired FBI agents, people with credentials beyond a bachelor's degree, and 3 years of waitressing. Because experienced profilers and retired FBI agents come with baggage, Ethan replied. They have patterns of thought shaped by institutional training, ethical frameworks that conflict with the realities of my business, and most critically, they have reputations that make them conspicuous. You, on the other hand, are invisible, a waitress with untapped potential. No one would look at you and think criminal consultant. That anonymity is worth more than a dozen fancy credentials. You want me because I'm disposable, Lily said, the psychology of it crystallizing in her mind. If something goes wrong, I'm just a waitress who got in over her head. No government connections to investigate, no professional reputation to protect. I disappear and nobody looks too hard. Ethan's expression shifted, something like respect entering his eyes. You have a remarkably cynical view of human nature. I studied criminal psychology. Cynicism came with the degree. Then you understand that I'm being honest with you. Yes, your lack of profile is valuable, but that doesn't make you disposable, quite the opposite. People who understand the risks and choose to proceed anyway are far more reliable than those operating under illusions. I'm not interested in manipulating you, Lily. I'm interested in employing you, with full transparency about what that employment entails. The main course arrived. Beef Wellington for Ethan, Chilean sea bass for Lily. The waiter refilled their wine glasses and withdrew, leaving them in their bubble of expensive privacy. "What happened last night?" Lily asked. "Who were those men, and why did they want you dead?" "Competitors," Ethan said simply. "I control certain supply chains they wish to access. They believed removing me would create opportunities for themselves. They were incorrect. And now? Now they are in custody, being questioned by individuals who are far better at extracting information than the Chicago Police Department. By tomorrow, I'll know who hired them, who provided the intelligence about my schedule, and who else might be planning similar attempts. Then I'll respond appropriately." The casual way he discussed torture made Lily's stomach turn. Respond appropriately meaning what? Kill them? Respond appropriately meaning neutralize the threat in the most efficient manner available. Ethan met her eyes steadily. "I won't lie to you about the nature of my business, Lily. People die, sometimes at my order. If that's a boundary you can't cross, walk away now. I'll pay for lunch, have my driver take you home, and we'll part as friendly acquaintances. No hard feelings, no consequences." This was the moment, Lily realized, the actual threshold. Everything before had been preamble, negotiation, dancing around the central question. But now it stood naked before her. Was she willing to work for a man who ordered deaths the way other businessmen ordered office supplies? Her phone buzzed in her purse, probably her mother, worried about last night. Lily ignored it, her attention fixed on Ethan. "If I say yes," she began slowly, "what exactly would my work involve?" "Initially, observation and analysis. I'd introduce you to various associates and you'd provide psychological assessments. Who's loyal, who's ambitious, who's unstable. You'd attend meetings, social functions, business dinners. You'd watch people interact and tell me what you see beneath the surface. And if I assess that someone is planning to betray you, then I'd take appropriate measures to protect my interests, which might include killing them, which might include a range of responses, with lethal force being one option among many," Ethan corrected. "I'm not a cartoon villain, Lily. I don't murder people casually, but I operate in an environment where violence is sometimes necessary for survival. If you can't accept that reality, this conversation is pointless." Lily's hands were shaking again. She hid them under the table, buying time by taking a long sip of wine that tasted like regret and possibility mixed together. "How did you know I'd be good at this?" she asked. "Last night was the first time we ever really spoke." "I've been observing you for 6 months," Ethan admitted. "Every Friday, I watched how you interacted with customers, how you handled difficult situations, how you processed information. I saw you diffuse an argument between drunk patrons using psychology rather than management intervention. I watched you identify a credit card skimmer at table 8 and quietly alert Marco before the thieves could escape. You have exceptional observational skills and the intelligence to act on what you observe. Last night simply confirmed what I already suspected." "You've been testing me," Lily said, the realization settling over her like cold water. "The Friday visits, the routine, the predictability, it was all deliberate. You made yourself a target to see if I'd notice." "Partially," Ethan conceded, "though I genuinely do enjoy Marcello's osso buco. But yes, I wanted to see if you were as sharp as your academic record suggested. You exceeded expectations." "That's manipulative. That's thorough. I don't hire people without understanding their capabilities." Ethan finished his beef Wellington with obvious appreciation. "You can be angry about the methodology, but the results speak for themselves. You identified a credible threat and responded appropriately. That's the quality I need." Their plates were cleared by a waiter who moved with ghost-like silence. Dessert menus appeared, though Lily couldn't imagine eating anything else. Her mind was too full of calculations, weighing risks against rewards, ethics against economics. $200,000 would change her life. But it would also change her, transform her from a woman with unused potential into an active participant in criminal enterprise. There was no moral ambiguity here, no gray area to hide in. Ethan Blackwood was exactly what Detective Morrison had warned her about, and accepting his offer meant stepping deliberately into darkness. "I need time to think," Lily said finally. "Of course." Ethan signaled for the check. "Take all the time you need. The offer remains open for 72 hours. After that, I'll assume your answer is no and make alternative arrangements. And if I say no, what happens then?" "Nothing. You return to your life, I return to mine. The only difference is that you'll have my card if you ever need assistance, and I'll have a pleasant memory of the woman who saved my life over Osobuco." The check arrived in a leather folder. Ethan signed without looking at the total, the privilege of wealth so vast that restaurant bills were beneath notice. "One more question," Lily said as they stood to leave. "If I say yes, can I quit? If I decide it's not for me, can I just walk away?" Ethan's pause was almost imperceptible, but Lily caught it. Her psychology training flagged the hesitation, the careful consideration before answering. "That would depend on what you'd learned by the time you wanted to leave," he said finally. "If you quit after a week, having observed nothing of consequence, then yes, you could walk away freely. But if you quit after months or years, having accumulated knowledge about my operations and associates," he trailed off meaningfully. "Then I'd be a liability," Lily finished, "and you'd neutralize me the same way you neutralize other threats. I'd strongly discourage you from leaving in a way that might compromise operational security," Ethan said carefully. "But I'm not in the habit of harming former employees who maintain appropriate discretion. Most people who leave my organization do so with generous severance packages and my blessing, provided they keep their mouths shut." "Most people, not all." "Not all," Ethan agreed. "Some people lack the judgment to remain silent about matters that don't concern them. Those individuals experience consequences. But you strike me as someone with excellent judgment." They rode the elevator down in silence. The Mercedes waited exactly where they'd left it, as if the driver had never moved. Ethan opened the door for Lily himself, a gesture that felt oddly intimate after their clinical discussion of murder and moral compromise. 72 hours, he reminded her. "After that, the offer expires. Whatever you decide, I respect your choice." The drive back to her apartment felt longer than the journey to the restaurant. Lily watched Chicago scroll past her window, the familiar streets looking different now, as if she was seeing them through new eyes. Or maybe it was just that she was different, changed by the knowledge that she had a choice most people never got: continue struggling in acceptable poverty, or step into prosperity purchased with moral flexibility. Her phone had accumulated 6 missed calls by the time she got home. 3 from her mother, 2 from Maya, 1 from Carmen, asking if she was okay after last night. Lily ignored them all, unable to engage with normal life while her mind churned through impossible calculations. She pulled out both business cards, Ethan's and Detective Morrison's, and laid them on her kitchen counter like opposing players in a game of chance. One represented safety, legitimacy, the path society approved of. The other represented danger, wealth, and the use of skills she'd worked so hard to develop. Lily's laptop sat on her tiny kitchen table, still open to the student loan portal. She refreshed the page out of habit, and there it was. $58,347.82 remaining. Years of payments that barely touched the principal, interest compounding faster than she could pay it down. At her current rate, she'd be 40 before the debt was cleared. $200,000 would eliminate that number entirely. Would give her freedom she'd never known, opportunities she'd only dreamed about. All it would cost was her complicity in crimes she couldn't even imagine yet. Lily made coffee she didn't drink, took a third shower, tried to read a book but couldn't focus past the first page. Her apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in with the weight of decision. At 7 p.m., her mother finally caught her on the phone. "Lily Marie Stanton, I have been calling you all day. Are you trying to give me a heart attack? Sorry, Mom, it's been a crazy day." I saw the news about the shooting. You could have been killed. You need to quit that job immediately and come home where it's safe. Catherine Stanton had been delivering variations of this speech for 3 years, ever since Lily had refused to move back to the suburbs after graduation. The city was dangerous, the job was beneath her, the apartment was too small, a litany of maternal concern that felt suffocating rather than comforting. I'm fine, Mom. Nobody got hurt. This time. What about next time? What if those men had started shooting at customers instead of each other? You'd be dead, Lily. Dead because you insisted on staying in that terrible city doing that terrible job. Lily closed her eyes, fighting the familiar urge to scream. My job is fine. I'm fine. Everything is fine. Nothing about this is fine. You have a degree from Northwestern, for heaven's sake. You could be doing something important, something safe. Instead, you're serving pasta to criminals who get in gunfights. The irony of her mother's words wasn't lost on Lily. If she accepted Ethan's offer, she'd technically be doing something important with her degree. Just not the kind of important her mother had in mind. I have to go, Mom. I'll call you tomorrow. Lily, wait. She ended the call, guilt and frustration warring in her chest. Her mother meant well. Maya meant well. Everyone in her life wanted the best for her, defined by their own limited understanding of what best meant. But none of them understood the suffocating reality of being smart enough to recognize opportunity, but too poor to pursue it. None of them carried student debt that felt like drowning in slow motion. None of them had skills they desperately wanted to use, locked away behind economic barriers they couldn't overcome through effort alone. Ethan Blackwood understood. He'd looked at her resume, her potential, her frustrated ambition, and offered her exactly what she needed, a chance to be more than a waitress treading water in an ocean of debt. All it would cost was her soul. Or maybe just her innocence, which she'd been losing gradually anyway through 3 years of financial struggle and professional disappointment. Lily spent Sunday in her apartment, avoiding calls and messages, thinking in circles that led nowhere productive. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, demanding she return to normal life despite feeling fundamentally altered. Marcello's had reopened, the bullet hole in the ceiling already repaired, the broken bar replaced with one identical to its predecessor. If you didn't know what had happened Friday night, you'd never suspect violence had torn through this space like a tornado. Marco greeted Lily with a hug that squeezed the air from her lungs. Lily, thank God you're okay. You need anything? You tell me. Extra shifts? Different schedule? Whatever you need. I'm fine, Marco, really. But she wasn't fine. She moved through her shift in a daze, serving customers with mechanical efficiency while her mind replayed her conversation with Ethan. 48 hours remained on his offer. 48 hours to choose between struggling virtue and comfortable moral compromise. Carmen cornered her during a quiet moment in the kitchen. Okay, what's going on? You've been weird all day. Just tired, Lily deflected. Bullshit. You're never just tired. Talk to me. Lily wanted to confide in her friend, wanted to share the impossible choice she faced. But how could she explain without revealing things that would endanger Carmen? The knowledge that Ethan Blackwood was a criminal, that he'd offered Lily a job, that she was actually considering it, these were secrets that could get people killed. I'm thinking about quitting, Lily said instead, which was technically true. Looking for something that uses my degree. About damn time, Carmen said, relief flooding her features. You're too smart for this place, Lil. We all know it. What kind of job? Consulting work, psychological profiling, risk assessment. The pay is good, but the hours would be irregular. Take it, Carmen urged. Seriously, take it. You've been waiting tables long enough. Go be brilliant somewhere that appreciates it. If only Carmen knew what appreciating it meant in Ethan Blackwood's world. But Lily just smiled and nodded, accepting advice that came from love but lacked crucial context. Her shift ended at 10 p.m. Lily was collecting her things from the staff room when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I hope you're considering my offer thoughtfully. Whatever you decide, I meant what I said about the value of your assistance Friday night. The attached has been deposited in your account, regardless of your decision. EB. Lily opened her banking app with trembling fingers. The balance displayed made her gasp audibly, $25,000 more than it should be. A second text arrived immediately. Consider it a finder's fee for saving my life, not contingent on employment, simply gratitude. $25,000, deposited in her account like it was nothing, because to Ethan Blackwood, it was nothing. The amount wouldn't even dent his monthly expenses, but it represented 6 months of Lily's current salary. 6 months of work, handed to her for one warning delivered over a restaurant table. This was what power looked like. Not the ability to hurt people. Any thug with a gun had that. Real power was the ability to change someone's life with a gesture, to make problems disappear with a phone call, to offer opportunities that felt like miracles to the recipients but were merely Wednesday afternoon to the giver. Lily sat in her car in Marcello's parking lot, staring at her phone screen, understanding with perfect clarity that Ethan had just made her decision infinitely more complicated. $25,000 eliminated her most urgent financial pressures. She could breathe for the first time in 3 years, could actually save money instead of watching it evaporate into loan payments and rent. But it also created obligation. Not a legal one. The text explicitly stated the money wasn't contingent on employment, but a psychological one, the subtle debt of gratitude that would make refusing his job offer feel like ingratitude. Manipulation? Or genuine generosity? With Ethan Blackwood, the distinction was probably irrelevant. He was smart enough to know that $25,000 would influence her decision, regardless of his stated intentions. Lily drove home through the Chicago night, her mind finally settling into clarity. She'd been approaching this decision wrong, weighing abstract morality against concrete benefits. But morality was a luxury of people who could afford it, and Lily couldn't afford much of anything. The real question wasn't whether working for Ethan was right or wrong. The real question was whether she could live with herself afterward, whether the person she'd become was someone she could recognize in the mirror. And honestly, Lily had been watching herself become smaller, more defeated, more hopeless with each passing year of financial struggle. She'd been dying slowly, her potential evaporating like water in the desert sun. At least working for Ethan would let her be something, even if that something was morally questionable. At 11:47 p.m. on Monday night, with 24 hours remaining on Ethan's offer, Lily made her choice. She pulled out his business card, the one she'd carried in her wallet since Friday like a talisman or a curse, and dialed the number. He answered on the second ring, his voice unsurprised, as if he'd been expecting her call at this exact moment. "Lily, I'll do it," she said before she could change her mind. "I'll take the job, but I have conditions." "I'm listening." "First, I want everything in writing, contracts, salary, benefits, termination clauses, everything legal and documented." "Agreed." "Second, I won't participate in violence personally. I'll provide analysis and assessment, but I won't pull triggers or dispose of bodies or whatever else happens in your world." "Agreed." "That's not the role I'm hiring you for anyway." "Third, if I identify someone as a threat and you decide to eliminate them, I don't want to know the details. I'll give you my assessment, and what you do with that information is your business." "A reasonable boundary," Ethan acknowledged. "Anything else?" "Yes. If this goes wrong, if I end up arrested or killed because of your business, you make sure my sister is taken care of. Maya is pre-med at Northwestern. I want her education funded no matter what happens to me." Silence on the other end of the line, long enough that Lily wondered if she'd pushed too far. Then Ethan spoke, his voice carrying a warmth she hadn't heard before. "You're protecting your family. I respect that." "Agreed. If anything happens to you because of your association with me, your sister's education will be fully funded through medical school, and she'll receive a stipend for living expenses. You have my word." "Your word," Lily repeated, tasting the phrase. "What's that worth in your world?" "Everything," Ethan said simply. "I've built my reputation on keeping promises. Breaking my word would be far more damaging than any bullet." "Okay then." Lily took a deep breath, feeling like she was jumping off a cliff into darkness. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow. My driver will collect you at 10 a.m. Wear something professional. We have meetings." "What kind of meetings?" "The kind where you'll practice your new skills," Ethan replied. "Welcome to Blackwood Enterprises, Lily Stanton. Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow will be illuminating." The call ended, leaving Lily alone in her apartment with the weight of her decision settling over her like a shroud. She'd crossed the threshold, stepped through the door, made the choice that Detective Morrison had warned her against and her own common sense had questioned. But she'd also taken control of her life for the first time in 3 years. Had chosen action over stagnation, risk over safety, potential over poverty. Whether that made her brave or stupid, Lily couldn't say. She suspected she'd find out soon enough. Sleep came eventually, though it brought dreams of gray eyes and business cards and doors that closed behind her with the finality of prison gates. When her alarm went off at 8 a.m. Tuesday morning, Lily woke to a new reality. She was no longer a waitress with a psychology degree. She was a consultant for a criminal organization, about to step into a world she'd only studied from academic distance. She showered and dressed with the mechanical precision of someone preparing for battle. Black suit, modest heels, minimal jewelry, professional armor for whatever waited beyond her apartment door. At 9:55 a.m., Lily stood by her building's entrance, watching for the Mercedes. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Coffee this week? Miss you." Lily typed a response. "Busy with new job stuff. Soon, though. Love you." The Mercedes arrived at exactly 10 a.m., as punctual as Ethan's Friday restaurant visits. The same driver, the same professional silence, the same smooth journey through Chicago's streets. But this time, Lily wasn't visiting Ethan's world as a curious guest. She was joining it as an employee, a participant, a willing accomplice to crime she couldn't yet imagine, but would soon analyze with professional detachment. The car pulled up to an office building in the Loop, all glass and steel and corporate anonymity. Nothing to distinguish it from 100 other buildings where legitimate businesses conducted legitimate affairs. Except Lily knew better now. She understood that shadows thrived in plain sight, that criminal empires operated behind the facade of respectability, that men like Ethan Blackwood built kingdoms where no one thought to look. The driver opened her door. 15th floor, suite 1520. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you. Lily stepped onto the sidewalk, looked up at the building that would become her new workplace, and felt the last vestiges of her old life fall away like a skin she'd outgrown. There was no going back now. Only forward, into whatever darkness or light waited beyond those glass doors. She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked inside. The elevator's ascent felt like a descent into water, each floor adding pressure until Lily's ears popped at the 15th level. The doors opened onto a reception area that could have belonged to any upscale consulting firm. Tasteful artwork, leather furniture, a receptionist whose smile was professionally calibrated to be welcoming without being warm. "Miss Stanton," the woman said, as if Lily's arrival had been marked on a calendar weeks in advance. "Mr. Blackwood is in the conference room, through those doors, second left." The hallway beyond was eerily quiet, soundproof to the point where Lily's footsteps on the plush carpet were the only indication she was moving at all. She found the conference room exactly where directed, pausing outside to steady herself before knocking. "Come in," Ethan's voice called. The room was larger than her entire apartment, dominated by a mahogany table that could seat 20. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline, the city spreading beneath them like a kingdom awaiting conquest. 3 men sat around the table with Ethan, their conversation dying the moment Lily entered. Ethan stood, his movements fluid despite the tension that suddenly electrified the room. "Gentlemen, this is Lily Stanton, our new consultant. Lily, allow me to introduce some key members of our organization." The first man was in his 50s, silver hair combed back from a face that had seen too much sun or too much stress. He wore an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the bulk of someone who'd maintained military fitness decades after leaving service. His handshake was firm enough to hurt. "Marcus Webb," he said, his accent placing him somewhere in the American South. "Head of Security Operations." The second man was younger, maybe 30, with the restless energy of someone who'd consumed too much caffeine or too much ambition. His suit was newer, cheaper, trying too hard to project authority his age hadn't earned yet. "Vincent Salazar. I manage our distribution networks." The third man didn't stand or offer his hand. He simply studied Lily with dark eyes that reminded her of a snake evaluating prey. Mid-40s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of stillness that suggested violence held in careful check. "Robert Chen. I handle our more delicate negotiations." Lily cataloged each introduction with the analytical part of her brain that never stopped working. Marcus was ex-military, probably special forces given his age and position. Vincent was ambitious and insecure, compensating for youth with aggressive posturing. Robert was the dangerous one, the kind of man who'd kill you while discussing the weather and feel nothing afterward. "Pleased to meet you all," Lily said, taking the seat Ethan indicated next to his own position at the head of the table. "Ms. Stanton has a degree in criminal psychology from Northwestern," Ethan continued, settling back into his chair. "She'll be providing behavioral analysis and risk assessment for our various enterprises. Her insights will help us make more informed decisions about personnel and partnerships." "With all due respect," Vincent interrupted, his tone suggesting he had none. "What does a college kid know about our business? No offense, but we've been operating just fine without some psychology student telling us how to do our jobs." Lily felt the challenge like a slap, but before she could respond, Ethan's voice cut through the room with the precision of a scalpel. "Ms. Stanton saved my life Friday night by identifying a coordinated assassination attempt that our security team missed until she brought it to my attention. I'd say that qualifies her to offer observations about our operational vulnerabilities, wouldn't you, Vincent?" The younger man's face flushed, but he had enough sense to nod and fall silent. Marcus watched the exchange with barely concealed amusement, while Robert's expression never changed at all. "Now then," Ethan continued as if the interruption had never occurred. "We have a situation that requires Ms. Stanton's particular expertise. Marcus, if you would brief her." Marcus pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table to Lily. The screen displayed a photograph of a man in his early 40s, handsome in a weathered way, with the kind of smile that suggested he'd once been charming before life had worn the edges smooth. "Daniel Reeves," Marcus said, "independent contractor we've used for transportation logistics over the past 2 years. Recently, he's been making noise about expanding his role, taking on more responsibility within the organization. Problem is, some of his financials aren't adding up. Money's moving in directions that don't match the work he's doing for us." Lily studied the photograph, then scrolled through the additional information on the tablet. Bank records, phone logs, surveillance photographs showing Reeves meeting with people whose faces had been circled in red. "You think he's working with your competitors," Lily said, not a question, but a statement. "We think he might be," Robert corrected, his voice as emotionless as his face. "Or he might be running a side business we don't know about. Or he might be skimming. We need to know which before we decide how to handle him." "And by handle, you mean what exactly?" Lily asked, though she already knew the answer. "That depends on what he's actually doing," Ethan replied smoothly. "If he's simply running side operations that don't conflict with our interests, we'll renegotiate his contract with appropriate adjustments. If he's skimming, we'll recover what he's taken and terminate the relationship. If he's actively working against us..." He let the sentence trail off meaningfully. "You'll kill him," Lily finished. "We'll neutralize the threat he represents," Ethan said. "Your job is to tell us which scenario we're dealing with. Daniel is meeting us for dinner tonight at 7. You'll observe him, engage in conversation, and provide your assessment of his truthfulness and intentions." Lily's hands were shaking again, hidden beneath the table where no one could see. This was it. The actual work. The real reason Ethan had hired her. Not abstract consulting about hypothetical situations, but immediate analysis that would determine whether a man lived or died. "What if I'm wrong?" she asked quietly. "What if I assess him incorrectly and you make the wrong decision because of my analysis?" "Then we'll all learn from the mistake," Ethan said, his tone suggesting that learning from mistakes involved consequences Lily didn't want to contemplate. "But I don't think you'll be wrong. You have good instincts. Trust them." The meeting continued for another hour, Marcus and Robert discussing operational details that flew over Lily's head. Shipment schedules, distribution points, payment structures that all sounded legitimate until you understood what was actually being shipped and distributed. Vincent contributed occasionally, trying too hard to sound knowledgeable, overcompensating for his earlier embarrassment. Lily absorbed it all, her psychology training kicking into analytical mode despite her moral reservations. She watched how the men interacted with each other, noting power dynamics and unspoken tensions. Marcus deferred to Ethan, absolutely, but challenged Robert on tactical details. Vincent tried to align himself with whoever seemed to be winning each micro-debate. Robert existed in his own orbit, contributing when necessary but maintaining emotional distance from the proceedings. When the meeting finally ended, the others filed out, leaving Lily alone with Ethan in the vast conference room. "You handled Vincent well," Ethan observed, standing to pour himself coffee from a service cart Lily hadn't noticed before. He's ambitious and insecure, a dangerous combination. He'll test you repeatedly until he's convinced you're not a threat to his position. And Robert? Lily asked. He barely acknowledged my existence. Robert doesn't acknowledge anyone's existence unless they're useful or dangerous. You haven't proven either yet, so you're invisible to him. Consider it a blessing. Robert's attention is rarely beneficial. Ethan brought 2 cups of coffee to the table, settling back into his chair with the casual elegance that seemed to define his every movement. How are you feeling? Overwhelmed? Terrified? Regretting your decision? All of the above, Lily admitted. Plus confused about why you're throwing me directly into analyzing someone whose life depends on my assessment. Shouldn't there be training, orientation? Something beyond, here's a tablet, figure out if we should kill this guy? You've had 4 years of training, Ethan replied. Your degree taught you how to analyze behavior, assess credibility, identify deception. Tonight's dinner is simply applying those skills in a practical context. The practical context being that a man dies if I get it wrong. A man who may be actively trying to destroy my organization and everyone in it, Ethan countered. Daniel Reeves isn't an innocent. He knows exactly what business he's in, what risks he's taking. If he's chosen to betray that understanding, the consequences are his responsibility, not yours. Lily sipped her coffee, buying time to organize her thoughts. You're asking me to make life and death decisions based on behavioral analysis that's inherently imperfect. Psychology isn't a science like chemistry or physics. I can't give you certainty. I'm not asking for certainty. I'm asking for your professional opinion, understanding that all decisions involve risk. Ethan's gray eyes held hers steadily. You think the FBI makes arrests based on perfect information? You think corporate security fires employees only when they're absolutely certain of wrongdoing? Every decision involves incomplete data and calculated risk. I'm simply being honest about the stakes. He was right, and Lily hated that he was right. The real world had always been messier than her textbooks suggested, full of gray areas where certainty was a luxury and decisions had to be made anyway. What happens if I assess him as truthful and you later discover he was lying? Lily asked. Then we deal with that situation when it arises, Ethan said. You're not infallible, and I don't expect you to be. What I expect is your honest professional assessment based on the best information available. If that assessment proves incorrect, we adapt. That's business. Business, Lily repeated, the word tasting like ashes. You keep calling it that, like you're trading commodities instead of making decisions about who lives and dies. Because it is business, Ethan replied, his tone hardening slightly. Sentimental language doesn't change reality. It just makes people feel better about things they can't control. I prefer clarity. Daniel Reeves is either an asset or a liability. Your job is to help me determine which. A knock at the door interrupted them. James Chen, the man who'd called Lily about the lunch invitation, entered with a garment bag draped over his arm. The dress you requested, he said to Ethan, then nodded politely to Lily. Ms. Stanton, there's a private office prepared for you down the hall. You'll find everything you need to prepare for this evening. Lily followed James to a smaller office that still managed to be larger than most people's bedrooms. The garment bag contained a cocktail dress in deep blue, elegant without being ostentatious, with a price tag that made Lily's eyes water before James discreetly removed it. Mr. Blackwood has excellent taste, James said, his professionalism never wavering. The dress should fit perfectly. He's quite observant about details. There are shoes and accessories in the closet, and the attached bathroom has anything you might need for hair and makeup. We'll leave at 6:30 for the restaurant. He left before Lily could ask the dozen questions crowding her mind. She hung the dress carefully, staring at it like it might bite. Ethan had bought her clothes, had known her size, her style, had selected something that would make her look like she belonged in whatever expensive restaurant they'd be dining at tonight. The level of attention was unsettling. How closely had he been watching her during those Friday visits to Marcello's? What else had he observed and cataloged about her life, her habits, her vulnerabilities? Lily spent the afternoon in the office, reviewing everything on the tablet Marcus had given her. She built a psychological profile of Daniel Reeves based on his communication patterns, spending habits, and relationship history. Married twice, divorced twice, 3 children from the first marriage with minimal contact. Pattern of short-term thinking and immediate gratification over long-term planning. Financial instability despite steady work, suggesting poor impulse control or hidden expenses. The profile that emerged was of a man who lived beyond his means, who valued appearance over substance, who likely made decisions based on immediate needs rather than strategic thinking. Exactly the type of person who might betray a business relationship if offered a better deal, or who might get caught skimming because he lacked the discipline to do it carefully. But profiles were generalizations, not certainties. Lily would need to see Reeves in person, watch how he interacted, listen not just to his words but to the spaces between them where truth often hid. At 6 o'clock, Lily showered in the office's private bathroom, marble and chrome, more luxurious than any hotel she'd stayed at, and carefully applied makeup she'd found waiting in a drawer. The dress fit perfectly, as James had promised, hugging curves Lily usually hid beneath her waitress uniform. The shoes were designer, expensive, making her 3 inches taller and significantly less stable. She studied herself in the full-length mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Gone was the struggling waitress with student loans and tired eyes. In her place stood someone who belonged in Ethan's world, polished and professional and completely foreign. James knocked at precisely 6:30. "The car is ready, Ms. Stanton." The restaurant was called Vertigo, located on the 95th floor of a building that made Lily's stomach drop during the elevator ride. The dining room was all dark wood and dim lighting, designed for intimate conversations and discreet business dealings. Ethan waited at a private table near the windows, rising as Lily approached. His approval was subtle but unmistakable. A slight nod, a brief smile that suggested she'd passed some unspoken test. "You look perfect," he said quietly, pulling out her chair. "Remember, tonight you're my consultant, here to provide business insights. Observe everything, but keep your analysis to yourself until we're alone." Daniel Reeves arrived 15 minutes late, offering apologies that sounded rehearsed and insincere. He was taller than his photographs suggested, with the kind of practiced charm that probably worked well on people who didn't look too closely. His suit was expensive but slightly worn, the tie knotted wrong, shoes that needed polishing. "Ethan, good to see you," Reeves said, shaking hands with enthusiasm that seemed forced. His eyes tracked to Lily with obvious interest. "And who's this lovely lady?" "Lily Stanton, one of my consultants," Ethan replied smoothly. "Lily, Daniel Reeves, who handles transportation logistics for several of our operations." Reeves's handshake lasted too long, his palm slightly damp. "Pleasure to meet you, Lily. What kind of consulting do you do?" "Behavioral analysis and risk assessment," Lily replied, watching his pupils dilate slightly at the words. Fear response, quickly masked. "Sounds fascinating," Reeves said, settling into his chair with false casualness. "So you analyze people's behavior? Like a psychologist?" "Similar principle, different application," Lily said. "I help identify patterns that might indicate problems before they become critical." She watched Reeves process this information, saw the calculation behind his eyes as he reassessed the dinner's purpose. He'd thought this was a business meeting, maybe a negotiation about the expanded role he'd been requesting. Now he understood it was an evaluation, and his behavior shifted accordingly, shoulders straightening, smile becoming more genuine, attention focusing intently on Ethan. The meal proceeded with the surface pleasantness of strangers making small talk, but Lily observed everything. The way Reeves ordered the second most expensive wine instead of letting Ethan choose, asserting dominance while maintaining plausible deniability. The way his stories about recent jobs included unnecessary details, the mark of someone building alibis into casual conversation. The way his phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket, messages he clearly wanted to check but didn't dare interrupt dinner to read. Ethan guided the conversation expertly, asking questions that seemed innocuous but were actually strategic probes. How was Reeves's son doing at college? Expensive school, must be challenging financially. Had Reeves considered that investment opportunity they'd discussed last month? Easy money if someone had the capital to commit. Each question elicited responses that Lily cataloged and analyzed. Reeves deflected questions about his finances, claiming everything was fine when his body language screamed otherwise. He expressed interest in investment opportunities but never committed, keeping his options open. He name-dropped contacts and connections with the desperation of someone trying to prove their value. Halfway through the main course, Reeves excused himself to the restroom. The moment he was out of earshot, Ethan leaned toward Lily. "Preliminary assessment?" he asked quietly. "He's lying about something," Lily replied, keeping her voice low. "Multiple somethings, actually. Financial pressure, definitely. Probably worse than your intelligence suggests. The phone buzzing is making him anxious, which means whoever's contacting him is important enough to stress about, but not important enough to acknowledge in front of you. That's concerning." "Conclusions?" "He's working with someone else, but I can't tell if it's competition or if he's just leveraging multiple income streams. His behavior suggests he's trying to keep all his options open, which means he hasn't fully committed to betraying you yet. He's still deciding which side offers the better deal." Ethan absorbed this information with a slight nod. "Can he be trusted?" "Not completely. He's loyal to himself first, everyone else second. If the price is right, he'll sell you out without hesitation." Reeves returned, his smile slightly strained. The conversation resumed, but now Lily noticed him watching her with increased wariness. He understood she was evaluating him, and his performance became more calculated, less natural. Dessert arrived, chocolate souffle that Lily couldn't taste. Her attention focused entirely on reading the subtle signals Reeves couldn't quite hide. The tension in his jaw when Ethan mentioned loyalty, the way his hand moved toward his phone pocket whenever conversation lagged, the careful neutrality when Ethan casually brought up competitors' recent difficulties. When the meal finally ended, Reeves stood with obvious relief. "Great catching up, Ethan. We should do this more often." "Indeed," Ethan replied, his tone revealing nothing. "Marcus will be in touch about next week's schedule." They watched Reeves leave, his gait slightly unsteady despite having barely touched his wine. The moment the elevator doors closed behind him, Ethan turned to Lily. "Full assessment. Everything you observed." Lily took a breath, organizing her thoughts. "Daniel Reeves is absolutely working with your competitors, but he hasn't fully committed yet. He's playing both sides, waiting to see which offers better terms. The financial pressure is severe. I'd guess gambling debts or something equally problematic that he can't discuss openly. The phone messages were from whoever he's negotiating with, probably wanting updates about this meeting. He's scared of you but not terrified, which means he thinks he has protection from whoever he's dealing with. Reliability going forward? Zero. Even if you match whatever offer he's received, he'll always be looking for a better deal. He's not ideologically opposed to you. He just values himself more than any relationship. That makes him fundamentally untrustworthy in any long-term capacity." Ethan listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When Lily finished, he was silent for a long moment, staring out at Chicago's glittering nightscape. "Your recommendation?" he finally asked. This was it, the moment where Lily's analysis would determine a man's fate. She could feel the weight of it, the responsibility settling over her shoulders like a lead blanket. "Cut him loose," she said quietly. "He's already compromised, and keeping him around creates more risk than benefit. But I'd recommend doing it in a way that doesn't make him vindictive. Severance package, clean break, maybe even a recommendation to whoever he's working with now. Make it clear the separation is business, not personal." "And if he's already given our competitors sensitive information?" Lily met Ethan's eyes steadily. "Then you'll need to assess what damage has been done and respond accordingly. But that's a tactical decision, not a psychological one. I can tell you what kind of person he is. What you do with that information is your choice." Ethan smiled slightly, something like approval crossing his features. "Very diplomatic. You're learning quickly." "I'm trying not to get someone killed on my first day," Lily replied, the weight of what she'd just done settling into her stomach like stones. "You may have saved several lives, actually," Ethan said, standing and offering his hand. "If Reeves had continued operating while feeding information to competitors, people in my organization could have been caught in situations they weren't prepared for. You've identified a problem before it became critical. That's exactly what I hired you for." The Mercedes was waiting when they exited the building, James holding the door with his usual discretion. Lily slid into the back seat, exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. Ethan settled beside her, and the car pulled smoothly into traffic. "You did well tonight. Better than I expected, actually." Most people struggle with the moral weight of their first assessment. You handled it with remarkable composure. I'm screaming internally, Lily admitted. I just hide it well. That's a valuable skill in this business, Ethan replied. Panic is natural. Acting on panic is amateur. They drove in silence for several blocks before Lily found the courage to ask the question burning in her mind. What happens to him, to Daniel? Marcus will handle the separation. Generous severance, glowing references, all very civilized. Reeves will go work for whoever's been courting him, probably thinking he got away with something. We'll monitor his activities and adjust our operations to account for whatever information he might have shared. 6 months from now, he'll be someone else's problem. That's it? You're just letting him go? Unless he's shared information that's actively endangered my people, yes. Killing him would be expensive, time-consuming, and would create more problems than it solves. Competitors would know we'd discovered his betrayal, which tells them their recruitment approach was successful. Better to seem oblivious, let him leave naturally, and adapt quietly. Lily processed this, trying to reconcile the man who ordered deaths as casually as coffee with the one choosing mercy for strategic reasons. I thought you'd want revenge, punishment for betrayal. Revenge is expensive and rarely profitable, Ethan said. I'm a businessman, Lily. Every decision gets evaluated on cost-benefit analysis. Killing Daniel costs resources and generates risk. Letting him leave costs nothing and potentially provides intelligence about competitor operations. The choice is obvious. Unless he's endangered your people, Lily repeated his earlier caveat. Unless that, Ethan agreed. Then the cost-benefit analysis shifts dramatically, which is why Marcus is currently verifying exactly what information Daniel had access to and what he might have shared. If that investigation reveals casualties or imminent danger, my response will be appropriately proportional. The car pulled up outside Lily's apartment building, the difference between their worlds suddenly very apparent. Ethan's empire of glass towers and expensive restaurants, Lily's studio with the shower that took forever to heat up. Tomorrow, Ethan said as James opened her door, you'll meet with our financial team. They handle the money side of operations, and we have some concerns about internal discrepancies. Nothing as dramatic as tonight, just quiet analysis of spending patterns and authorization trails. More people to evaluate for potential betrayal, Lily said, the future stretching before her in an endless parade of assessments and judgments. More people to understand, Ethan corrected gently. Not everyone you analyze will be a problem, Lily. Most people are exactly what they appear to be. Your job is to identify the exceptions before they become dangerous. Lily climbed out of the Mercedes, her expensive dress feeling like a costume now that she was back in her neighborhood. She turned back to say goodnight, but Ethan spoke first. You saved a life tonight, he said quietly. Maybe several. Daniel Reeves will go on living because you recommended mercy instead of elimination. That's worth something, even in this business. The Mercedes pulled away, leaving Lily alone on the sidewalk with the weight of her choices settling over her like snow. She'd evaluated a man, rendered judgment, influenced his fate. Tomorrow she'd do it again, and the day after that, until analyzing people for potential execution became as routine as serving osobuco had once been. Inside her apartment, Lily stripped off the expensive dress and stood under the shower's lukewarm spray, trying to wash away the feeling of complicity that clung to her skin like oil. She'd crossed a line tonight, stepped further into Ethan's world than she'd been during that first lunch or the job offer. She was part of it now. Not just an employee, but an active participant in an organization that trafficked in violence and lived by rules she was only beginning to understand. And the worst part, the thing that made her stomach turn and her hands shake, was that some part of her had enjoyed it. The intellectual challenge of reading Daniel Reeves, the satisfaction of accurate analysis, the power of knowing her words carried weight. It all felt disturbingly good. Like her brain had finally found the work it was designed for, even if that work served purposes her conscience couldn't quite accept. Lily dried off and climbed into bed, but sleep was elusive. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel Reeves' nervous smile and calculated charm, and wondered what Marcus Webb was doing right now. Verifying information, Ethan had said, checking what damage had been done. And if that verification revealed problems, if Reeves had shared information that endangered people, then Lily's recommendation of mercy would be overridden, and a man would die because he'd chosen the wrong side in a game where there were no good choices, only varying degrees of survival. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Dinner Sunday. I have so much to tell you about this guy in my anatomy class." Lily stared at the message, the normalcy of it feeling alien after the evening she'd just experienced. Her sister was worried about boys in her anatomy class while Lily evaluated people for execution. The distance between their worlds felt unbridgeable, a chasm that widened with every choice Lily made. She typed a response. "Sunday works. Can't wait to hear about him. Love you." Tomorrow would bring new evaluations, new judgments, new weights to carry. But tonight, Lily let herself pretend for a few minutes that she was still the person her sister believed her to be. Someone good, someone normal, someone whose biggest concerns were student loans and restaurant schedules instead of life and death assessments in expensive restaurants. The pretense lasted exactly as long as it took for her to remember the feel of that blue dress, the taste of food she couldn't afford, the power of sitting next to Ethan Blackwood, and knowing her words mattered in ways they never had serving tables. She'd chosen this path. Not blindly, not naively, but with full awareness of what it would cost and what it might offer. There was no going back, no returning to the innocence of Monday morning when her biggest decision was whether to pick up an extra shift. Lily Stanton, criminal consultant. That's who she was now. And tomorrow she'd put on another expensive dress and evaluate more people and push her conscience a little further into the darkness where men like Ethan Blackwood conducted their business with brutal efficiency and strategic mercy. Sleep came eventually, bringing dreams of gray eyes and cost-benefit analyses, of mercy and murder existing in the same conversation like they were simply different items on a menu. When Lily woke Wednesday morning, sunlight streaming through her inadequate curtains, she lay still for a moment trying to remember who she'd been before Friday night. The memory was already fading, becoming someone else's story. Someone who didn't understand that survival sometimes required compromise, that morality was a luxury of people who could afford it, that power came in many forms, and all of them demanded payment. Lily's phone showed 3 missed calls from her mother and a reminder that her next student loan payment was due in 2 weeks. She opened her banking app, looking at the balance that still seemed impossible with its extra $25,000. Blood money, her conscience whispered, payment for stepping into a world where people died based on cost-benefit analysis. Freedom money, her practical side countered, payment for using skills she'd worked hard to develop, for being valuable enough that Ethan Blackwood wanted to keep her alive and employed. The truth was probably somewhere between those extremes, lost in the gray areas where most of life actually happened. Lily got up, made coffee, and prepared for her second day at Blackwood Enterprises with the grim determination of someone who'd already committed to a path and could only walk forward. There was no going back. Only forward, into whatever darkness or light waited in the spaces between legitimate business and criminal enterprise, where a woman with a psychology degree evaluated people for a living and tried not to think too hard about what happened after she delivered her assessments. The Mercedes arrived at 9:30 Wednesday morning, earlier than Lily expected. She'd been nursing her second cup of coffee, staring at her laptop screen where an email from Northwestern's Alumni Association cheerfully reminded her about upcoming networking events. The disconnect between that world and her current reality felt almost comedic. James was waiting by the car, his expression more serious than usual. "Ms. Stanton, there's been a development. Mr. Blackwood requests your immediate presence." Lily's stomach dropped. "What kind of development?" "He'll brief you in transit," James replied, opening the door with urgency that contradicted his professional calm. The drive to the office took 12 minutes, during which Lily's mind created increasingly dire scenarios. Had Daniel Reeves done something? Had her assessment been catastrophically wrong? Was she about to witness the consequences of her first evaluation in ways she hadn't prepared for? They bypassed the 15th floor entirely, the elevator ascending to the 20th level that Lily hadn't known existed. The doors opened onto a space that bore no resemblance to the corporate offices below. This was Ethan's private domain, decorated with art that belonged in museums and furniture that probably cost more than luxury cars. Ethan stood by floor-to-ceiling windows, phone pressed to his ear, his posture radiating controlled fury. He ended the call as Lily entered, his expression smoothing into something approaching calm. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Marcus's investigation into Daniel Reeves uncovered something significantly worse than anticipated. He's been providing detailed information to the Volkov organization for the past 3 months. The name meant nothing to Lily, but Ethan's tone told her everything she needed to know. How bad? Routes, schedules, safe house locations, personnel movements, everything necessary to plan coordinated attacks against our operations. Ethan's voice was ice cold, the pleasant businessman from yesterday completely absent. 2 of my people were killed this morning in what appeared to be a random robbery. It wasn't random. Volkov knew exactly where they'd be when they'd be vulnerable because Daniel fucking Reeves told them. Lily felt the blood drain from her face. You said Marcus would verify. He did. The verification came too late. Ethan turned from the window, and Lily saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not anger exactly, something colder and more dangerous. 2 men are dead, Lily. Good men, with families who'll be notified this afternoon that their loved ones aren't coming home, because I took your advice about mercy for Daniel Reeves. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Lily's breath caught in her throat, panic rising. I recommended cutting him loose based on the information available. I didn't know. I'm not blaming you, Ethan interrupted, his tone softening slightly. You made a reasonable recommendation with incomplete intelligence. This is on me for not pushing Marcus to accelerate the timeline. But it demonstrates an important lesson about this business. Mercy has a cost, and sometimes other people pay it. He moved to a bar cart and poured 2 glasses of something amber. Lily accepted hers with trembling hands, the whiskey burning her throat when she swallowed. What happens now? She asked. Now we respond proportionally. Ethan's calm was terrifying, the deliberate control of someone who'd made these calculations many times before. Daniel Reeves dies, obviously. So do his immediate handlers in the Volkov organization. The question is scope. How far up their chain do we go? How public do we make it? These decisions have consequences that ripple for months. Why are you telling me this? Lily whispered. Because you need to understand what your assessments mean in practical terms. You recommended mercy, and that recommendation contributed to a situation where 2 people died. Not directly, not intentionally, but the chain of causation exists. You need to feel the weight of that if you're going to continue in this role. Lily set down her glass before she could drop it. You want me to feel guilty for people dying because I tried to prevent a death? I want you to understand that every decision in this business has consequences, Ethan replied. There are no clean choices, Lily, only trade-offs between different types of damage. You'll make assessments that save lives and assessments that cost lives, sometimes simultaneously. If you can't handle that complexity, tell me now. The room felt too small, the walls pressing in. Lily thought about the 2 men who wouldn't go home to their families, about Daniel Reeves, who'd made his choices knowing the risks, about herself standing in a luxury apartment discussing death like it was a quarterly earnings report. I can handle it, she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. What do you need from me? Right now, nothing. Marcus is handling the immediate response, but I wanted you to see this, to understand that the work we do here has real consequences. Academic psychology analyzes behavior from safe distance. What you do here puts blood on your hands whether you pull triggers or not. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus Webb entered, his expression grim. We've located Reeves. He's at his ex-wife's house in Evanston, probably thinking that makes him harder to find. Operational status? Ethan asked. Team is in position, waiting for authorization. Ethan glanced at Lily, something unreadable in his eyes. Ms. Stanton recommended we handle Reeves's termination quietly. Given current circumstances, do you maintain that recommendation? The question was a test, Lily realized. Ethan was asking if she'd stand by her analysis or cave under the pressure of consequences. She took a breath, forcing herself to think analytically despite the horror churning in her stomach. Yes, she said finally. Making an example of him doesn't change what's already happened. It just signals to Volkov that we're reactive and emotional. Better to handle it quietly and focus resources on the larger threat. Marcus looked surprised, but Ethan nodded slowly. Agreed. Marcus, execute the plan as discussed. Clean, quiet, minimal collateral exposure. Understood. Marcus left without another word. and Lily understood with crystalline clarity that she'd just signed Daniel Reeves' death warrant. The trembling started in her hands and spread through her entire body. Ethan guided her to a leather sofa, pressing another glass of whiskey into her grip. "Breathe," he said quietly. "This is the hardest part, the first time you understand that your words have lethal consequences. It gets easier." "I don't want it to get easier," Lily managed, tears she hadn't authorized burning her eyes. "I don't want to be the kind of person who orders deaths over whiskey like I'm selecting wine pairings." "Then you're in the wrong business," Ethan replied, not unkindly. "But I don't think you are. I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing work you're exceptionally suited for. The guilt you're feeling right now? That's your conscience, and it's valuable. The day it stops bothering you is the day you should quit." Lily's phone buzzed in her purse, a text from Maya about Sunday dinner, cheerful emojis decorating her enthusiasm. The juxtaposition was obscene. Her sister planning meals while Lily sat in a criminal's penthouse, drinking expensive whiskey and authorizing executions. "I need air," Lily said abruptly, standing on legs that felt like water. Ethan didn't stop her. He simply gestured to a door she hadn't noticed. "Terrace, take your time." The outdoor space was smaller than she expected, but beautifully appointed, with plants that shouldn't survive Chicago winters thriving in carefully controlled microclimates. The city spread below like a circuit board, millions of people living lives blissfully unaware of the violence being orchestrated in towers above them. Lily stood at the railing, the October wind cutting through her blazer, and tried to reconcile the person she'd been Monday morning with, who she was becoming. She'd wanted to use her education, had craved work that challenged her intellect, had dreamed of making decisions that mattered. Careful what you wish for, she thought bitterly. Her decisions mattered now, mattered enough that people died based on her recommendations. The terrace door opened behind her. Ethan approached slowly, giving her space to refuse his presence. When she didn't object, he stood beside her at the railing, silent for a long moment. "The two men who died this morning," he said finally. "David Chen and Marcus Okafor. David had a wife and two daughters, 8 and 11. Marcus was engaged, wedding planned for next spring. They worked for me for years, knew the risks, accepted them, but they trusted that I'd protect them, that the organization's intelligence and security would keep them reasonably safe." "And you failed them," Lily said. "Yes, because I prioritized mercy for Daniel Reeves over operational security. That's on me, not you. But it's a lesson about the cost of compassion in this business." Lily turned to face him, anger cutting through her guilt. "So what, I should recommend killing everyone who might potentially betray you? Turn into some paranoid executioner who sees threats everywhere?" "No," Ethan replied calmly. "You should make the best assessments you can with available information, understanding that sometimes you'll be wrong and people will suffer for it. That's the job, Lily. That's what you signed up for when you accepted my offer." "I didn't sign up for this," Lily protested. "I signed up to analyze behavior, provide psychological insights, not to decide who lives and dies." "Those are the same thing in my organization," Ethan said. "Every assessment you provide influences life and death decisions. There's no way to separate the analysis from the consequences. If you can't accept that, we should end this arrangement now, before you're in any deeper." It was an escape route, Lily realized. Ethan was offering her a way out, a chance to return to her safe, struggling, ordinary life before she accumulated more blood on her hands. She could walk away right now, take her $25,000 in student loan payments, go back to Marcello's and pretend this week had been a fever dream. But she thought about David Chen's daughters, about Marcus Okafor's fiancée planning a wedding that would never happen. Thought about the fact that her analysis, her recommendation for mercy, had contributed to their deaths, however indirectly. Walking away now wouldn't undo that, wouldn't bring them back or absolve her guilt. It would just mean their deaths had taught her nothing, that she'd learned no lessons from the cost of her inexperience. "I'm staying," Lily said quietly, "but I want to meet their families, David's wife and daughters, Marcus's fiancée. I want to see the people who paid for my mistakes." Ethan's expression shifted, something like respect entering his eyes. "That's not necessary. The organization handles death benefits, funeral arrangements, ongoing support for families. You don't need to involve yourself personally." "I want to," Lily insisted. "If I'm going to do this work, if my decisions are going to affect real people, I need to see them. Need to remember they're not just abstract casualties in reports. It'll make the work harder, Ethan warned. Easier to make difficult decisions when you can maintain emotional distance. Good, Lily replied. It should be hard. The day it becomes easy is the day I'm not fit for this job anymore. Ethan studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll arrange it. But understand, Lily, those families don't know the details of how David and Marcus died. They think it was random violence, wrong place, wrong time. You can't tell them the truth. What do I tell them? Nothing. You're a representative of the organization, offering condolences and ensuring they know they'll be taken care of. The specifics of your role remain confidential. They returned inside, the warmth of Ethan's penthouse feeling obscene after the harsh reality of the terrace conversation. James appeared with files that Ethan accepted wordlessly, his attention already shifting to the next crisis, demanding his attention. The financial team is ready for you downstairs, James told Lily. Unless you'd prefer to reschedule given this morning's events? Lily considered it, then shook her head. No, I'm here to work. Let's work. The financial offices occupied the 16th floor, a maze of cubicles and conference rooms where people managed the money that flowed through Blackwood Enterprises. The team leader was a woman named Sarah Park, mid-30s with the sharp eyes of someone who spent her days tracking numbers that didn't add up. Ms. Stanton, thanks for coming down, Sarah said, leading Lily to a private conference room. We've been reviewing authorization patterns and found some anomalies that Mr. Blackwood wants your perspective on. The anomalies, Sarah explained, involved a junior accountant named Thomas Wright, who'd been approving unusual expenses that technically fell within his authorization level but seemed inconsistent with normal operational patterns. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger automatic flags, but concerning when viewed cumulatively. Could be innocent, Sarah said, pulling up spreadsheets on a large monitor. Could be someone skimming carefully, could be external pressure making him approve things he shouldn't. We need to know which before we act. Lily studied the data, her analytical mind grateful for problems that existed in numbers rather than bodies. Thomas Wright's spending pattern showed small, irregular amounts going to vendors that existed but seemed marginally legitimate, the kind of thing that could be innocent error or deliberate theft, depending on intent. I'll need to meet him, Lily said. Interview him directly. Watch how he responds to questions about these transactions. Sarah looked uncomfortable. He doesn't know he's under investigation. We've kept this completely confidential. Then arrange a routine audit meeting, Lily suggested. Make it seem like standard procedure, not targeted investigation. I'll observe his reactions, ask follow-up questions, assess whether he's nervous because he's hiding something or nervous because unexpected audits make everyone anxious. The meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. Lily spent the intervening hours reviewing Thomas Wright's employment history, building a psychological profile from the available data. Young, mid-20s, Northwestern graduate like herself, though, from the business school. No criminal record, no obvious financial pressures, good employee reviews. On paper, he looks like exactly the kind of person who wouldn't risk his career for petty theft. But Lily had learned that paper rarely told the whole story. Thomas arrived at 2 o'clock, his nervousness apparent the moment he entered the conference room. Lily watched from behind a one-way mirror while Sarah conducted the initial review, noting his body language and stress responses. When it came time for Lily to enter, she'd already formed preliminary conclusions. Thomas was definitely nervous, but the pattern suggested guilt rather than ordinary audit anxiety. He touched his face too much, avoided direct eye contact when discussing specific vendors, and his responses became more elaborate and defensive when pressed for details. Mr. Wright, Lily said, settling into the chair across from him. I'm Lily Stanton. I consult on operational efficiency. These vendor payments you've been approving, walk me through your verification process. Thomas's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. Standard procedure. I check that invoices match purchase orders, verify the vendor is in our approved system, confirm the amount falls within authorization limits. And these specific vendors? Lily slid a list across the table. How often do you personally interact with their representatives? I don't. That's handled by procurement. I just process the payments. It was a lie. Not a complete fabrication, but an evasion significant enough that Lily caught it in the micro-expressions crossing his face. He absolutely had personal contact with at least some of these vendors, and that contact made him uncomfortable to discuss. She spent 40 minutes walking Thomas through increasingly specific questions, watching him construct elaborate justifications for decisions that should have been routine. By the time he left, sweating through his dress shirt despite the conference room's aggressive air conditioning, Lily had her assessment. Sarah was waiting when Lily emerged from the interview. "Well, he's definitely involved in something inappropriate," Lily said. "Whether it's deliberate theft or external pressure, I can't say for certain without more investigation. But those vendor payments aren't innocent mistakes. He's approving them knowing they're questionable, which means he's either being paid to do it or threatened into compliance." Recommendation? Lily thought about Daniel Reeves, about the cost of mercy and the price of mistakes. Continue surveillance quietly. Monitor his communications, track where he goes after work, see if he's meeting with anyone connected to these vendors. Don't confront him yet. If he's being pressured, confrontation might make whoever's pressuring him decide he's more liability than asset. Sarah nodded, making notes. "And if we find proof of deliberate theft?" "Then Mr. Blackwood makes the call about consequences," Lily replied, not wanting to think about what those consequences might be. "My job is assessment, not judgment." The distinction felt thinner with every passing hour. Lily's phone rang as she left the financial offices. Marcus Webb's name on the screen made her stomach clench. "It's done," he said without preamble. "Reeves is handled. Clean, quiet, no complications." Daniel Reeves was dead, killed on her recommendation by people following her analysis. The reality of it hit Lily like a physical blow, making the hallway tilt. "Ms. Stanton," Marcus's voice came through the phone. "You there?" "Yes," Lily managed. "Thank you for letting me know." She ended the call and found the nearest restroom, barely making it to a stall before vomiting up the coffee and whiskey that had been churning in her stomach all day. When the nausea passed, she sat on the cold bathroom floor, her back against the stall door, and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd done. A man was dead. Not a good man, not an innocent victim, but a human being whose life had ended because Lily Stanton had assessed him as untrustworthy. Yes, he'd made choices that led to this outcome. Yes, he'd betrayed people and gotten others killed. But the final authorization for his execution had come from her analysis, her words, her professional opinion rendered over dinner in an expensive restaurant. The bathroom door opened. Footsteps approached, then stopped outside her stall. "Lily?" Ethan's voice, quiet and surprisingly gentle. "James saw you come in here. May I?" She unlocked the stall door, too exhausted to care about dignity. Ethan looked down at her on the bathroom floor without judgment, then simply sat down beside her, his expensive suit touching the tile without hesitation. "First kill is always the hardest," he said quietly, "even when you don't pull the trigger yourself." "Does it get easier?" Lily asked, her voice raw. "Yes and no. You'll learn to compartmentalize, to separate the analysis from the consequences. But if you're doing this job right, it should always bother you at least a little. The day it stops bothering you is the day you've lost something essential." They sat in silence on the bathroom floor, an absurd tableau, a criminal kingpin and his newest consultant, processing death in a corporate restroom while the organization continued operating around them. "David Chen's wife is named Jennifer," Ethan said eventually. "His daughters are Sophie and Emma. They live in a house in Oak Park that the organization owns and has now transferred into Jennifer's name, mortgage-free. She'll receive monthly payments equivalent to David's salary for the next 18 years, plus health insurance and college funds for both girls." "And Marcus Okafor's fiancée?" "Rebecca Torres. She's a teacher at an elementary school in Pilsen. She'll receive a lump sum death benefit and grief counseling if she wants it. The wedding venue has been canceled, deposits returned. Marcus's life insurance will pay out fully despite the circumstances of his death." Money couldn't replace the people they'd lost, but Ethan was trying to mitigate the damage, trying to ensure the families were cared for even as he ordered retribution against those responsible for their deaths. "I want to meet them," Lily repeated her earlier request. "Jennifer and Rebecca. Tomorrow, if possible." "It's masochistic," Ethan warned. "Punishing yourself won't undo what happened." "I'm not punishing myself. I'm reminding myself that the people I analyze in reports and spreadsheets have lives and families and futures. If I'm going to do this work, I need to stay connected to that reality. Ethan helped her to her feet, his hand was warm and steady. You're either going to be exceptionally good at this job or it's going to destroy you. I haven't decided which yet. Maybe both, Lily replied, washing her face at the sink and trying to repair the damage her breakdown had caused to her appearance. James was waiting outside the restroom with a bottle of water and breath mints, his discretion absolute. Lily accepted both gratefully, realizing that her distress had been anticipated and prepared for. This wasn't the first time someone in Ethan's organization had processed their first kill in a bathroom. The thought should have been disturbing. Instead, it was oddly comforting. She wasn't alone in this struggle, wasn't the first person to grapple with the moral weight of necessary violence. Evening had fallen by the time Lily left the office, Chicago's lights transforming the city into something beautiful and dangerous. The Mercedes was waiting, but before she could climb in, Ethan appeared beside the car. Have dinner with me, he said. Not business, not an assessment, just dinner. Lily was too exhausted to refuse. They went to a small Italian place in Little Italy, nothing like the expensive restaurants where they'd evaluated Daniel Reeves. This was neighborhood dining, family-owned, with red checkered tablecloths and wine served in simple glasses. I come here when I need to remember why I do this, Ethan explained, ordering in Italian that sounded native fluent. The owner, Sal Benedetti, his father worked for my father years ago, back when the organization was smaller, more personal. Sal knows what I am, what I do, but he also remembers when my father protected his family from people who wanted to destroy their business. The food came. Simple pasta, fresh bread, wine that tasted like sunshine. Lily ate mechanically, her appetite absent but her body needing fuel. You asked earlier if it gets easier, Ethan said, twirling pasta around his fork with unconscious elegance. The truth is, it gets different. You develop calluses, emotional armor that lets you function, but underneath, if you're worth anything, the weight remains. You just learn to carry it better. How many people have you killed? Lily asked suddenly. Directly or indirectly, how many deaths are you responsible for? Ethan considered the question seriously. Directly? Fewer than you'd think. Maybe a dozen, early in my career when I was proving myself. Indirectly? Hundreds? Possibly thousands if you count the downstream effects of decisions I've made over 20 years. And you sleep at night? Most nights, Ethan admitted. Because I tell myself that the people who die in my business are players who know the rules. They make choices understanding the consequences. The truly innocent rarely get caught in the crossfire. I work hard to ensure that. David Chen and Marcus Okafor were players who knew the rules, Lily pointed out. They still ended up dead. Yes, and I'll carry that. Add them to the ledger of costs incurred maintaining an empire built on violence and fear. Ethan's expression was bleak. This isn't a business for people seeking moral clarity, Lily. It's a business for people willing to live in the gray areas and make impossible choices. If you need certainty, need to know you're doing the right thing, you should leave now. But Lily thought about her student loans, about her wasted degree, about 3 years of serving tables and going nowhere. Thought about the intellectual challenge of reading people, the satisfaction when her assessments proved accurate, the power of having her words matter. I'm staying, she said for the second time that day. Not because I think this is right, but because I'm good at it, and it's the only chance I have to use my education for something meaningful. Meaningful, Ethan repeated, tasting the word. Interesting choice. Most people would say what you're doing is the opposite of meaningful. Most people waste their lives in jobs that don't challenge them, that don't utilize their potential. At least here, my brain is engaged. My skills matter, even if the application is morally questionable. Ethan raised his wine glass in a small toast. To morally questionable applications of exceptional skills. May we carry the weight without being crushed by it. Lily clinked her glass against his, sealing a compact she didn't fully understand but couldn't seem to escape. She was in this now, truly committed in ways that went beyond contracts and salary negotiations. They finished dinner in companionable silence. Then Ethan walked her to the Mercedes personally. Tomorrow you'll meet Jennifer and Rebecca. James will drive you. Be kind, Be professional and don't tell them anything they don't need to know. And after that? After that, we have a situation developing in our pharmaceutical distribution network that needs your assessment. Also, Thomas Wright's surveillance is showing interesting results. You'll have plenty to keep you occupied. The drive home felt longer than usual, the distance between Ethan's world and her apartment stretching into an unbridgeable chasm. Lily climbed the stairs to her studio, unlocked the door, and stood in the doorway looking at the space that no longer felt like home. Maya had texted 3 more times, each message more concerned than the last. Lily finally responded, "Sorry, new job is intense. I'm okay, just adjusting. Love you. Sunday for sure." She showered for the 3rd time that day, trying to wash away guilt that clung deeper than skin. When she finally climbed into bed, exhaustion pulled her under quickly, but sleep brought no peace. Dreams of Daniel Reeves' nervous smile merged with David Chen's daughters, asking where their father was, with Rebecca Torres in a wedding dress walking down an empty aisle. Lily woke multiple times, each awakening leaving her more drained than the sleep had. Thursday morning arrived with the inevitability of consequences. The Mercedes came at 9, James's expression sympathetic as he opened the door. "First stop is Oak Park. Mrs. Chen is expecting you." The house was beautiful, a restored Victorian in a neighborhood where families raised children and worried about school districts instead of organized crime. Jennifer Chen answered the door with exhausted eyes and a practiced smile, 8-year-old Sophie clinging to her legs while 11-year-old Emma watched warily from the stairs. "You must be from David's work," Jennifer said, inviting Lily inside. "They said someone would come." Lily followed her into a living room filled with family photos, David smiling in every frame, on a beach, at graduations, holding his daughters as babies. The weight of his absence was palpable, a void that money and monthly payments could never fill. "I wanted to express our condolences personally," Lily said, the words feeling inadequate. "David was valued highly in the organization. His loss is deeply felt." Jennifer's smile cracked slightly. "Everyone keeps saying that, how valued he was, how tragic this is, but nobody can tell me why. Why was my husband in that neighborhood at that time? Why was he carrying the kind of money that made him a target? What was he really doing for your company?" The questions were daggers, each one cutting closer to truths Lily couldn't reveal. She met Jennifer's eyes steadily, seeing the intelligence there, the awareness that her husband's employer dealt in shadows and violence. "I can't answer those questions," Lily said quietly. "I wish I could. What I can tell you is that David's family will be cared for. The house is yours, mortgage-free. Monthly payments will continue. Sophie and Emma's college educations are fully funded." "Blood money," Jennifer said, without heat. "That's what this is, isn't it? You're paying us to not ask questions, to not look too closely at why my husband died." Lily wanted to deny it, to offer comfort or explanation. But Jennifer deserved honesty, at least as much as Lily could provide within her constraints. "Yes," she said simply. "We're ensuring you're cared for, and in exchange we hope you won't pursue questions that don't have good answers." Something like respect entered Jennifer's eyes. "At least you're honest about it." The others who came, they pretended this was all just tragic coincidence, like David was some random victim. But he knew what he was getting into, didn't he? Knew the risks and took them anyway for the money. "He knew," Lily confirmed, "and he was careful, professional, as safe as anyone can be in that line of work. What happened wasn't his fault." It was as much truth as she could offer. Jennifer seemed to understand, nodding slowly. She called Emma down from the stairs, and Lily spent 30 minutes talking with David's daughters about their father, listening to their memories and grief, feeling the weight of complicity settle deeper into her bones. When she finally left, Sophie gave her a drawing, David surrounded by hearts and flowers, "Best Daddy," written in crayon across the top. Lily accepted it with trembling hands, promising to keep it safe. Rebecca Torres lived in a small apartment in Pilsen, surrounded by wedding magazines and a dress hanging in the closet that would never be worn. She was younger than Lily expected, maybe 25, with the kind of devastating beauty that made Marcus Okafor's death feel even more wasteful. "I keep thinking he'll come back," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face as she showed Lily the wedding plans. "Like this is all a mistake, and he'll walk through that door and laugh about how we almost canceled everything over a misunderstanding." Lily sat with her for 2 hours, listening to stories about Marcus, about their plans, about the future they'd imagined together. She couldn't offer the same financial pragmatism she'd given Jennifer. Rebecca didn't have children to provide for, didn't need to understand the quid pro quo of blood money. What Rebecca needed was someone to acknowledge her grief, to validate the love she'd lost. So Lily listened and cried with her and felt every ounce of guilt she'd been trying to compartmentalize crash over her like a wave. By the time James drove her back to the office, Lily was emotionally wrecked. But she also understood something essential. The work she was doing had real consequences for real people. Every assessment mattered. Every decision rippled outward in ways she couldn't fully predict. It didn't make the guilt easier to carry, but it clarified why the guilt was necessary, why the day it stopped bothering her would be the day she needed to quit. Ethan was waiting in his penthouse when Lily arrived, bourbon poured and ready. "How was it?" "Awful," Lily replied, accepting the drink. "Necessary, but awful." Sophie drew me a picture of her father. Rebecca showed me her wedding dress. I met the cost of my mistakes in crayon and white lace. "And?" Ethan prompted. "And I understand why you wanted me to see it. Why you insisted I meet them personally." Lily downed the bourbon in one burning swallow. "I won't forget this. Won't let myself become so detached that these people are just casualties in reports." "Good," Ethan said simply. "Now come look at the Thomas Wright surveillance. You were right about external pressure. The question is whether it's criminal or personal." They spent the rest of Thursday analyzing Thomas's movements, building a picture of a young man caught in a trap, partially of his own making. By evening, Lily had a clearer understanding of who Thomas Wright was and what he'd gotten himself into. Friday arrived with the weight of a week that had transformed Lily's entire existence. She woke in her apartment knowing it would be one of the last mornings she'd spend there. Ethan had suggested she move somewhere more secure, somewhere the organization could better protect her now that she was becoming valuable. The Mercedes arrived at its usual time, but today James drove her somewhere new. A townhouse in Lincoln Park, 3 stories of elegant living space that made her studio apartment look like a closet. "Mr. Blackwood arranged the lease," James explained. "Fully furnished, security system integrated with organizational protocols. He thought you might appreciate more space to think." Lily walked through rooms that belonged in architecture magazines, understanding that this was another layer of the trap. Ethan wasn't just employing her, he was surrounding her with comfort, making his world so attractive that leaving would mean sacrificing everything she'd started building. She should refuse, should insist on maintaining her independence, keeping her cheap apartment as a reminder of who she'd been before crossing this threshold. But the townhouse had a study where she could work, a kitchen that actually had counter space, windows that didn't have bars. It represented not just comfort, but legitimacy, a life where she was more than a struggling waitress with unused potential. "When can I move in?" Lily asked, and felt another piece of her old self fall away like a skin she'd outgrown. "Whenever you're ready," James replied. "The organization will handle the logistics." That evening, Lily met Maya for coffee, attempting to bridge the gap between her two lives. Her sister bubbled with enthusiasm about the anatomy class guy, about her coursework, about everything happening in a world where the biggest concerns were exam schedules and dating. "You seem different," Maya observed, studying Lily with the sharp perception of someone who'd known her entire life. "Tired, but also more, I don't know, present? Like you're actually engaged with life instead of just going through motions?" "New job is challenging," Lily said, which was perhaps the greatest understatement of her life. "Using my degree finally. It's intense but satisfying." "I'm so proud of you," Maya said, squeezing her hand. "Mom's still freaking out about the shooting, but I told her you're doing amazing things. What kind of consulting again?" "Risk assessment and behavioral analysis," Lily replied, the lie coming easier each time she told it. "Helping companies understand personnel and security vulnerabilities." "Sounds perfect for you. Are they paying well?" Lily thought about the $25,000 in her account, the $200,000 salary, the townhouse waiting for her to move into. "Yes, really well." They talked for another hour, Maya's innocent chatter providing temporary refuge from the weight of Lily's choices. When they finally hugged goodbye, Lily held on longer than usual, knowing the distance between their worlds would only grow wider with time. Saturday, Lily moved into the townhouse with James's assistance, the organization's efficiency transforming logistics into a seamless transition. By evening, her belongings looked lost in the spacious rooms, her meager possessions not nearly enough to fill the space she now occupied. Sunday morning brought a summons from Ethan, not a request but an expectation that she'd attend a meeting at his estate outside the city. The drive took 40 minutes, each mile taking Lily further from the Chicago she knew into a landscape of wealth and isolation. Ethan's estate was breathtaking, all modern architecture and strategic landscaping designed for both beauty and security. He greeted her at the door personally, dressed casually in a way she'd never seen before. "Welcome," he said, leading her through rooms that could house families. "I thought you should see where I actually live, not just where I conduct business." The informality felt significant, an invitation into personal space beyond the professional relationship they'd maintained. Lily followed him to a study lined with books, a room that felt lived in rather than decorated. "We need to discuss your future with the organization," Ethan said, pouring coffee from a French press. "You've proven yourself capable beyond my initial expectations. I want to expand your role, give you more responsibility, and accordingly more compensation." "More people to evaluate for execution?" Lily asked, not bothering to soften the words. "More opportunity to prevent unnecessary deaths through accurate assessment," Ethan corrected. "You saved lives this week, Lily. Thomas Wright would have been killed if your analysis hadn't identified external pressure instead of deliberate betrayal. You provided nuance where others would have seen only threat." Lily hadn't known that, hadn't realized Thomas's fate had hung on her assessment. "What happened to him?" "We handled his gambling debts and made it clear to the people pressuring him that he was under our protection. He's still employed, still useful, and no longer compromised. That's a win directly attributable to your work." One life saved against two lost and one ended. The moral mathematics made Lily's head hurt. "I need more than just work," Lily said abruptly. "If I'm going to survive in this world, I need to understand it better. Teach me about the organization, about the business, about how all this actually works beyond my narrow assessments." Ethan smiled slowly. "I was hoping you'd ask. Starting Monday, you'll shadow me. See the organization from the inside, understand the ecosystem you're operating in." What Lily was really asking for was context, a framework to process the decisions she was making. But what she was getting was deeper immersion, another step into Ethan's world that would make leaving increasingly impossible. They spent Sunday afternoon in his study, Ethan explaining the structure of his empire with the passion of someone who'd built it from nothing. By evening, Lily understood more about the criminal underworld than her degree had ever taught her, and she realized with disturbing clarity that she was fascinated. This was the work her brain had always craved, complex, challenging, consequential. The fact that it served criminal purposes was a moral footnote to the intellectual satisfaction of finally being somewhere her skills mattered. When James drove her back to the townhouse that night, Lily stood in her new living room and understood that she'd crossed another threshold. She wasn't just working for Ethan Blackwood anymore. She was becoming part of his world, integrating into an organization that would either make her exceptional or destroy her completely. Possibly both, she thought, echoing Ethan's earlier assessment. Sunday dinner with Maya had been canceled via apologetic text. Work emergency, she'd claimed, which was becoming too common. Her sister's disappointed response made Lily's chest tighten with guilt that had nothing to do with criminal assessments. She was losing pieces of her old life, letting them slip away to make room for the person she was becoming. Soon there'd be nothing left of the waitress with dreams of using her degree. Just Lily Stanton, criminal consultant, living in luxury built on moral compromise and intellectual satisfaction. The person she was becoming should have terrified her. Instead, as she fell asleep in her new bedroom with its view of Lincoln Park, Lily felt something disturbingly close to contentment. She was home. Not in the townhouse, not in Chicago, but in work that finally challenged her. In a role that utilized every skill she possessed. In a world where her words carried weight and consequences. The cost of that home was higher than she'd imagined when she'd accepted Ethan's offer. But as sleep pulled her under, Lily couldn't quite bring herself to regret the price. Not yet. Monday morning arrived with news that shattered Lily's fragile equilibrium. She was reviewing files in her new study when Ethan called, his voice carrying an edge she'd learned to recognize as controlled fury. "We have a situation. Maya's been taken." The words didn't register at first, her brain refusing to process them. "What? What are you talking about?" "The Volkov organization grabbed your sister 20 minutes ago outside her dorm. They left a message. They want me to meet them alone, or they start sending pieces of her back to you." Lily's vision tunneled, the room spinning as panic crashed over her in waves. Maya, her baby sister, the one innocent person in Lily's life, dragged into this nightmare because Lily had been stupid enough to think she could work for a criminal without consequences. "Where?" Lily demanded, already moving toward the door. "Where do they want to meet?" "An abandoned warehouse in Englewood." "Lily, listen to me." "I'm coming with you," she interrupted, her voice shaking with rage and terror. "She's my sister. I'm not sitting here while she's in danger." "That's exactly what you're going to do," Ethan replied, his tone brooking no argument. "This is a trap designed to get me exposed and vulnerable. If you come, you're just another hostage they can use against me." "I don't care. Maya doesn't even know what I do, doesn't know anything about you or your organization. She's completely innocent, and she's terrified right now because of choices I made. I have to help her." A pause on the other end, then Ethan's voice softened slightly. "Then help her by using your skills, not your panic." "The Volkov organization doesn't just want me dead. They want leverage. They took Maya because they researched you, found your vulnerability. That means they know you're important to me, which means they'll have done psychological profiles trying to predict how we'll respond." The analytical part of Lily's brain, the part that had been honed by years of study and sharpened by weeks in Ethan's organization, fought its way through the panic. He was right. This was psychological warfare, and responding emotionally was exactly what their enemies wanted. "What do you need from me?" she asked, forcing herself to think like a consultant instead of a terrified sister. "I need you to profile Viktor Volkov and his key people. Everything we have on them is being sent to your tablet now. I need to know how they think, how they'll structure this meeting, what their actual endgame is beyond just killing me. We have 2 hours before the meet. Help me understand what I'm walking into." The files arrived as promised, dozens of documents detailing Viktor Volkov's organization and operations. Lily spread them across her new desk, her hands shaking so badly she could barely swipe through screens, but she forced herself to focus. Viktor Volkov was 53, former Russian military intelligence, had built his American operations over 20 years through strategic brutality and careful political connections. Unlike Ethan's calculated professionalism, Victor's reputation was built on spectacle and fear, public executions, theatrical displays of power designed to terrorize competitors into submission. His second-in-command was a man named Dmitry Kuznetsov, younger and even more violent than Viktor, known for creative approaches to torture and interrogation. The psychological profiles suggested severe antisocial tendencies bordering on psychopathy, someone who genuinely enjoyed inflicting pain. If they had Maya, if Dmitry was involved, Lily couldn't let herself think about what might be happening to her sister right now. She dove deeper into the files, building psychological models of each key player in Viktor's organization. An hour into her analysis, patterns began emerging. Viktor's theatrical brutality wasn't just personality, it was strategy. He used fear as a business tool, making examples of enemies to prevent future challenges. But there was also desperation in his recent moves. The attacks on Ethan's organization, the aggressive expansion into territories he couldn't properly defend, the risky play of kidnapping Maya. These were the actions of someone under pressure, not someone operating from strength. Lily called Ethan back. "Victor's desperate. I think he's hemorrhaging money and support, and he needs a win against you to shore up his position. That's why the move is so aggressive. It's not just about killing you, it's about doing it publicly enough that his reputation gets restored." "Which means the warehouse meet is definitely a trap," Ethan replied. "Probably rigged with explosives or sniper positions, something that lets him claim he defeated me in a direct confrontation. But he also needs you to actually show up for that to work," Lily continued, her analytical mind cutting through fear. Which means Maya is alive and will stay alive until you're there. She's bait, not a victim. Yet. Yet, Ethan echoed grimly. I'm bringing the full team. Marcus is coordinating tactical response. Robert's handling alternative approaches. We're not walking into this blind. What can I do? Lily asked, hating the helplessness in her voice. Keep analyzing. I need to know every psychological angle Victor might use, every way this could play out. You're my edge, Lily. Use that brain. The next hour was torture. Analyzing files while imagining Maya bound in some dark room, terrified and confused about why she'd been taken. Lily built scenario after scenario, mapping Victor's likely strategies against Ethan's tactical responses. Her phone buzzed with a video message from an unknown number. Lily's heart stopped as she opened it. Maya sat in a metal chair, hands zip-tied behind her back, tears streaming down her face. A man's voice off camera spoke in accented English. Your sister is very pretty, Ms. Stanton, very scared. She keeps asking why this is happening. What should I tell her? That her sister works for a criminal? That she's been evaluating people for execution? The camera moved closer to Maya's face, showing the terror in her eyes. You have 2 hours. Ethan Blackwood comes alone to the Englewood warehouse, or we start the interrogation. And Dimitri, he very much enjoys interrogations. The video ended. Lily immediately forwarded it to Ethan, then watched it 3 more times with her consultant brain, cataloging every detail. The room's acoustics suggested large and empty, probably industrial. Maya's restraints were professional, but not excessive. They wanted her controllable, but unharmed for now. The threat about interrogation was designed to trigger panic, to make Ethan and Lily act rashly. Everything about this was psychological manipulation, and recognizing that didn't make it less effective. Ethan called back within minutes. I saw the video. Marcus identified the location from background details. It's not the Englewood warehouse. They're holding her in a meatpacking plant in back of the yards. The warehouse meat is the trap, like we thought. So what's the play? Lily asked. I go to the warehouse as requested. Marcus takes a team to the meatpacking plant and extracts Maya. We handle both situations simultaneously. Victor will have people at both locations, Lily warned. He's not stupid enough to leave Maya unguarded while you're at the meet. Which is why Marcus is taking our best people. Robert's coordinating with some independent contractors who owe us favors. We're going to hit the meatpacking plant hard and fast, extract Maya before Victor's people can react. And you're still walking into an obvious trap, with full tactical support and countermeasures. Vincent is coordinating sniper positions. We're bringing armored vehicles, the works. Victor wants theatrical? We'll give him theater. Lily wanted to protest, wanted to insist on a safer approach that didn't involve Ethan exposing himself to danger, but she understood the logic. Victor had made this personal by taking Maya, and Ethan's response needed to be equally personal to prevent future attacks. Showing fear or hesitation would just invite more aggression. I'm tracking everything from here, Lily said. If I see any angles you're missing, any psychological elements that change the calculus, I'll call immediately. I know you will. Ethan paused. Lily, we're going to get her back. Maya will be home safe tonight. I promise you that. Promises from criminals probably shouldn't mean much, Lily thought, but she believed him anyway because the alternative was unthinkable. The next hour crawled by with agonizing slowness. Lily monitored communications between Ethan's various teams, watching tactical preparations unfold with military precision. Marcus's extraction team assembled, heavily armed and strategically positioned near the meatpacking plant. Ethan's delegation moved toward the Englewood warehouse, a convoy of expensive vehicles that looked civilian but were armored against everything short of rocket launchers. At precisely 1:47 p.m., both operations commenced simultaneously. Lily watched through body camera feeds as Marcus's team breached the meatpacking plant, moving with practiced efficiency through corridors and cold storage rooms. Gunfire erupted almost immediately. Victor's guards had been positioned exactly where her analysis predicted, but Marcus's people were ready for them. The firefight was brief and brutal. Lily watched men drop on both sides, the clinical detachment of body cameras making death look choreographed and unreal. But it was real, she knew. Those were real people dying because her sister had been taken, because she'd accepted a job working for a criminal, because every choice had consequences that rippled outward in ways she couldn't control. Marcus's voice came through the tactical channel, calm despite the gunfire. Second floor secured. Moving to probable holding location. At the Inglewood warehouse, Ethan's convoy pulled up exactly on schedule. The building loomed dark and empty, obviously abandoned for years. Ethan stepped out of the lead vehicle, alone as requested, while his security team positioned themselves at strategic points around the perimeter. Lily's analysis suggested Victor would reveal himself theatrically, making a show of his power before attempting to kill Ethan. The prediction proved accurate when floodlights suddenly illuminated the warehouse entrance, and Victor Volkov emerged with a dozen armed men. "Ethan Blackwood," Victor called out, his voice amplified by speakers Lily couldn't see. "You come to trade yourself for the girl? How noble! How predictable!" "Where is she?" Ethan's voice was controlled, revealing nothing. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere you'll never find before my people finish their work. Dmitri is very thorough. The girl will tell us everything about your organization before he's done." It was a bluff, Lily knew immediately. Victor was trying to rattle Ethan, make him think Maya was being tortured to extract information. But the timeline didn't work. They'd only had her for a few hours, and interrogations took time to break someone properly. This was theater, exactly as her analysis predicted. The body camera feeds from the meatpacking plant showed Marcus's team breaching a reinforced door, then systematically clearing a large room. And there, Maya, still zip-tied to the metal chair, 2 guards standing nearby. The guards turned toward the breach, raising weapons, but Marcus's people were faster. 2 precise shots, and both guards dropped. Maya screamed, terrified and confused as tactical teams swarmed around her. Marcus himself cut her restraints, his voice gentle despite the tactical situation. "You're safe now. We're taking you home." "Where's Lily?" Maya sobbed. "I want my sister." "She's safe. We work for her employer. You're going to be fine." At the warehouse, Victor was still monologuing about Ethan's various failures and imminent death. Lily recognized the pattern. He was stalling, waiting for something. Probably confirmation that his people at the meatpacking plant had dealt with any rescue attempt. That confirmation wasn't coming. Marcus's team had already extracted Maya and was moving toward their extraction vehicles, leaving Victor's dead guards behind without ceremony. Lily called Ethan's tactical coordinator. "Maya's secure. Marcus is extracting now. Victor's stalling. He's waiting for word from the meatpacking plant that isn't going to come. When he realizes the extraction succeeded, he's going to panic. That's when he'll be most dangerous." The coordinator relayed this to Ethan, who showed no visible reaction to the news. He simply stood in the warehouse parking lot, letting Victor continue his theatrical display while positioning himself for whatever came next. Victor's phone rang. Lily watched through the tactical cameras as he answered it, his expression shifting from confident to confused to furious in rapid succession. He barked orders in Russian, then turned back to Ethan with murder in his eyes. "You think you're clever?" Victor snarled. "You think rescuing the girl changes anything? I still have you here, surrounded, outgunned." "Do you?" Ethan asked mildly. On cue, red laser dots appeared on Victor's chest and forehead. Sniper positions Vincent had coordinated, invisible until this moment. Victor's guards raised their weapons, but suddenly found themselves similarly targeted by shooters they couldn't see. "This was never about the girl," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the parking lot with deadly calm. "This was about you making a desperate play for relevance, trying to shore up your failing organization by taking something from me. But you miscalculated, Victor. You thought I'd come here panicked and vulnerable. Instead, I came prepared." Victor's face contorted with rage. He shouted something in Russian, and his guards opened fire toward Ethan's position. But Ethan had already moved, diving behind an armored vehicle while his security team returned fire with overwhelming force. The firefight lasted less than 30 seconds. Victor's people were outpositioned, outgunned, and outmatched by professionals who'd been preparing for this exact scenario. When the gunfire stopped, 6 of Victor's guards were dead or incapacitated, and Victor himself was on his knees with 3 laser dots steady on his head. Ethan approached slowly, his weapon held casually but ready. "You took something precious from one of my people. You traumatized an innocent girl who had nothing to do with our business. That requires proportional response." "Kill me then," Victor spat. "Make your reputation on my corpse." Killing you would be easy, Ethan replied. But I'm a businessman, Victor. I think in cost-benefit terms. Your death creates a power vacuum that multiple organizations would fight to fill, destabilizing territories I've spent years securing. That's expensive and inconvenient. He gestured to Marcus, who'd arrived from the meatpacking plant extraction. Marcus handed Ethan a tablet displaying financial records and communications logs. These are copies of your organization's books and communication records that my people acquired during the extraction operation, Ethan continued. They show exactly how desperate your financial situation is, how many of your key people are already negotiating with competitors, how close you are to complete collapse. If I release these to the right people, your organization implodes within a week. You'll lose everything: money, power, reputation, probably your life when former allies decide you're more valuable dead than alive. Victor's face went pale, understanding the full scope of his defeat. So here's my offer, Ethan said. You cease all operations in Chicago immediately. You withdraw to your East Coast territories and stay there. You never mention my name, my organization, or today's events to anyone. In exchange, I don't release these records, and I don't pursue further retribution for the trauma you caused. And if I refuse? Then I release the records, your organization collapses, and you die badly when the vultures come circling. Your choice, Victor. Live diminished or die completely. Lily watched through the tactical feeds as Victor processed his options, seeing the calculation in his eyes. He was a survivor, had always been a survivor. Pride would demand he refuse, go down fighting rather than accept humiliation. But survival instinct was stronger than pride. Chicago is yours, Victor said finally, the words seeming to physically pain him. I withdraw. Excellent business decision, Ethan replied. Marcus will ensure you reach your vehicle safely. If you're still in Chicago 48 hours from now, our agreement is void. Marcus and his team escorted Victor and his surviving guards to their vehicles, professional courtesy extended to defeated enemies. When they'd departed, Ethan returned to his own convoy, his expression unreadable. Lily was waiting at the townhouse when Marcus's team arrived with Maya. Her sister stumbled out of the tactical vehicle, disheveled and terrified, but physically unharmed. The moment she saw Lily, Maya collapsed into her arms, sobbing with relief and confusion. What happened? Who were those people? Why did they take me? The questions tumbled out between sobs while Lily held her, feeling the full weight of her choices crushing down. It's complicated, Lily said quietly. Come inside. I'll explain everything. They sat in the townhouse living room, Maya still trembling, while Lily made tea. Neither of them would drink. The moment of truth had arrived. Lily could lie, could protect her sister from the reality of what she'd become. Or she could offer the honesty Maya deserved after being traumatized by consequences she hadn't earned. The job I took, Lily began carefully. It's not exactly what I told you. The consulting work is real, but the client is complicated. Criminal, Maya said flatly. Those men who rescued me, they were professional, military or something like it. And the way they talked about you, about their employer, this isn't corporate consulting, Lily. What have you gotten yourself into? So Lily told her. Not everything. Maya didn't need to know about Daniel Reeves or David Chen or the cost-benefit analyses of human life. But she explained Ethan's organization in broad strokes, her role analyzing people, the money that had seemed too good to refuse, the moral compromises she'd made in exchange for using her education. Maya listened in stunned silence, her expression shifting from shock to anger to something Lily couldn't quite identify. You're working for the mob, Maya finally said. You're literally employed by organized crime. It's more complicated than— No, it's not. Maya's voice rose, tears streaming down her face. I was kidnapped, Lily. I was tied to a chair, terrified I was going to be killed because of your job. How is that complicated? You're right, Lily said quietly. It's not. I made choices that put you in danger, and I'm sorry. More sorry than I can possibly express. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo the trauma. What happens next time? What if these people come back, or different people, or— Maya's breath hitched into hyperventilation. Lily moved to her side, guiding her through breathing exercises until the panic subsided. When Maya could speak again, her voice was small and broken. I don't know who you are anymore. My sister was a waitress with student loans who dreamed about using her psychology degree. This person, this criminal consultant living in a fancy townhouse and making deals with mob bosses, that's not Lily. It is now, Lily replied, the truth settling between them like a wall. I can't undo the choices I've made. I can only try to protect you from the consequences. By what? Hiding me? Giving me security guards? That's not protection, that's a prison. The doorbell interrupted them. Ethan stood on the doorstep, his expression carefully neutral. May I come in? Lily wanted to refuse, wanted to keep him separate from her sister, from the last piece of her life that hadn't been completely corrupted. But Maya had already seen too much, knew too much. The separation was illusion now. This is Ethan Blackwood, Lily said as he entered. My employer. Maya stared at him with a mixture of fear and anger. You're the reason I was kidnapped. Yes, Ethan acknowledged simply. My organization's conflict with Viktor Volkov made you a target. For that, I apologize. It won't happen again. How can you promise that? How can anyone promise that in your world? Because Viktor is finished in Chicago, and I'm ensuring your protection going forward. You'll have security, discreet, professional, invisible, unless needed. Your tuition will be fully covered through medical school with a stipend for living expenses that will make student loans irrelevant. When you graduate, if you choose to remain in Chicago, I'll help you establish your practice with whatever resources you need. You think money fixes this? Maya demanded. You think paying for my education makes up for the trauma? No, Ethan replied calmly. Nothing makes up for trauma. But money provides options, security, the ability to build a life without the constant stress that broke so many of your peers before they finished school. It's not redemption, it's pragmatic compensation for damage I caused. Maya turned to Lily. Is this what you've become? Someone who thinks everything can be solved with money and violence? I've become someone who understands the world is more complicated than I learned in textbooks, Lily replied. Someone who makes impossible choices in impossible situations and lives with the consequences. I can't, Maya stood abruptly. I need to go. I need to think about all this somewhere that isn't here. Marcus will drive you wherever you want to go, Ethan offered, and ensure you arrive safely. I don't want your security guards. You have them anyway, Ethan said, his tone suggesting this wasn't negotiable. What happened today was a message to my organization. The response needs to be equally clear. My people and their families are protected absolutely. You're Lily's family, which makes you my responsibility. Accept the security gracefully or resist it futilely, but it's not optional. Maya looked at Lily, betrayal written across her face. You've really chosen this? This life? This world? This person? Yes, Lily said, the word costing her everything. I have. Maya left without another word, Marcus following at a discreet distance. The door closed with a finality that felt like endings, like relationships severed beyond repair. Lily stood in her expensive townhouse, surrounded by the trappings of success she'd thought she wanted, and felt emptier than she'd been in her studio apartment with its broken shower and student loan anxiety. She'll come around, Ethan said quietly. Give her time to process the trauma, to understand that the security and support are genuine. Or she won't, Lily countered. Maybe she'll finish school and leave Chicago and never speak to me again because I'm the sister who works for criminals and got her kidnapped. Possibly. Family relationships are complicated, especially when contaminated by business realities. Ethan moved to pour them both bourbon from the bar he'd had installed in the townhouse. But she's also practical, like you. Once the emotional reaction subsides, she'll recognize the value of the protection and support being offered. You're betting I care more about practicality than ethics, Lily said, accepting the glass. I'm betting you care about survival and the well-being of people you love. Ethics are lovely in theory, but they don't pay medical school tuition or protect vulnerable people from criminal organizations. He wasn't wrong, and Lily hated that he wasn't wrong. She'd made her choices for exactly the reasons he described: survival, opportunity, the chance to be more than she'd been. The fact that Maya was traumatized because of those choices didn't change the underlying logic, just added another layer to the cost Lily was paying. They sat in silence, drinking bourbon, while Chicago's evening lights began twinkling beyond the townhouse windows. Somewhere in the city, Viktor Volkov was presumably packing to leave, his organization shattered by a single afternoon's work. Somewhere else, Maya was processing trauma and betrayal, trying to reconcile the sister she'd known with the reality Lily had become. "I want to be there when you meet with Victor's financial people," Lily said abruptly. "When you absorb his Chicago operations into yours. I want to see what I helped accomplish today." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That's not your typical consulting work." "I'm expanding my role, remember? You wanted to teach me the business. Consider this my education continuing." "It'll be brutal," Ethan warned. "Victor's people know they're beaten. Some will accept absorption into my organization gracefully. Others will resist and need to be handled firmly. You'll see aspects of this business you've been insulated from." "Good," Lily replied, surprising herself with her vehemence. "I'm tired of being insulated. Maya's traumatized. David Chen's daughters don't have a father. Rebecca Torres is planning a funeral instead of a wedding, all because of decisions I influenced while sitting in comfortable distance from consequences. If I'm going to do this work, I need to see all of it." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, approval mixing with concern. "You're either going to become exceptional at this, or it's going to break you." "You've said that before." "I'm starting to think it's both." The integration of Victor's Chicago operations took 3 weeks of meetings, negotiations, and occasional displays of force when Victor's former associates proved resistant to new management. Lily attended every session, watching Ethan dismantle a rival organization with surgical precision and absorb its profitable elements while discarding liabilities. She saw men beg for their positions, watched careers end with casual efficiency, observed the machinery of criminal enterprise operating at scales she'd never imagined. It should have horrified her. Instead, she found herself fascinated by the organizational dynamics, the psychological manipulation, the strategic thinking required to manage an empire built on violence and fear. Maya didn't call for 2 weeks. When she finally did, her voice was careful, controlled, the warmth Lily associated with her sister conspicuously absent. "I'm accepting the tuition payment and security," Maya said without preamble. "Not because I forgive you or approve of your choices, but because I'm practical enough to recognize that refusing would be stupid pride." "I understand," Lily replied, her heart breaking at the distance in her sister's voice. "I don't know if we can have a relationship anymore," Maya continued. "I don't know how to reconcile who you've become with who I thought you were, but I don't want you to worry about my safety or my finances. I'll take what's offered, and I'll use it to build the life I want. After that, we'll see." "I love you," Lily said, needing her sister to know that truth regardless of everything else. "I know you do. I just don't know if that's enough anymore." The call ended, and Lily allowed herself exactly 10 minutes to cry before returning to the analysis she'd been preparing. There would be time for grief later, time to mourn the relationship she'd damaged beyond immediate repair. Right now, there was work that mattered, decisions that affected people's lives, an organization that needed her skills. The compartmentalization came easier than it should have. That worried her more than anything else. 6 months after the kidnapping, Lily stood in Ethan's penthouse reviewing quarterly reports with the casual competence of someone who'd been doing this work for years instead of months. Victor's former territories had been successfully integrated, producing revenue streams that had exceeded projections. Thomas Wright remained employed, his gambling debts managed, and his loyalty secured through strategic support. The Volkov organization had imploded exactly as predicted when Victor withdrew to the East Coast, creating opportunities Ethan's people had capitalized on efficiently. By every measurable metric, Lily's work was exceptional. Her assessments proved accurate more often than not. Her psychological insights prevented several potentially catastrophic personnel decisions, and her ability to read people made her increasingly valuable to an organization built on understanding human behavior. She'd also become comfortable with moral compromises that would have destroyed her 6 months ago. When assessments led to deaths, she processed the guilt and continued working. When decisions required choosing between bad options and worse ones, she made them with increasing confidence. When family relationships fractured under the weight of her choices, she accepted that cost as the price of the life she'd built. "You've exceeded every expectation," Ethan said, reviewing the same quarterly reports. "I want to make your position permanent, with appropriate compensation increases and additional responsibilities." What additional responsibilities? Lily asked, though she suspected she knew. Strategic planning. You've been reactive, analyzing people and situations as they arise. I want you involved in proactive planning, identifying opportunities, assessing risks before they materialize, helping shape organizational direction rather than just responding to challenges. It was a promotion into the inner circle, the core decision makers who actually ran the empire instead of just serving it. The person Lily had been 6 months ago would have recognized this as the final threshold, the point of no return where she stopped being someone who worked for criminals and became someone who was criminal. The person she'd become understood it was an opportunity to excel at work she was exceptionally good at, regardless of its moral implications. I accept, Lily said, with one condition, which is, Maya's security remains permanent and comprehensive, even if our relationship never recovers. Whatever happens between us personally, I want your guarantee that she'll be protected as long as she's in Chicago. Done, Ethan agreed immediately. She's family to you, which makes her family to this organization. That protection is absolute. They shook hands, sealing an arrangement that felt less like employment and more like partnership. Lily had become exactly what Detective Morrison had warned her against, someone embedded in Ethan's world so deeply that extraction was no longer possible. But she'd also become someone who used her education, who made decisions that mattered, who woke up every morning challenged rather than defeated. The cost had been steep, relationships fractured, innocence lost, moral certainty abandoned in favor of pragmatic survival. Yet standing in Ethan's penthouse overlooking the city she'd helped him control, Lily couldn't quite bring herself to regret the journey. Maya eventually did come around, though their relationship remained forever changed. She accepted the security, used the financial support to excel in medical school, and slowly rebuilt a connection with Lily based on acceptance rather than approval. They had dinner once a month, conversations carefully avoiding the details of Lily's work while acknowledging its reality. It wasn't the relationship they'd had before, but it was something. And in the world Lily had chosen, something was often the best you could hope for. 2 years after that Friday night at Marcello's, when 3 men had positioned themselves to kill Ethan Blackwood, Lily Stanton stood in a newly acquired office building, reviewing plans to expand operations into markets Victor's collapse had left vulnerable. She wore designer suits without thinking about the cost, lived in a penthouse that overlooked Lincoln Park, and made decisions that affected hundreds of lives with the calm competence of someone who'd learned to carry impossible weight. The Waitress with student loans and unused potential had been transformed entirely, replaced by a woman who navigated the criminal underworld with the same analytical precision she'd once applied to academic psychology. She'd saved lives through accurate assessments and ended them through the same skills. She'd lost pieces of herself she'd thought essential and discovered capabilities she'd never imagined possessing. Ethan found her reviewing the expansion plans, his presence as comfortable now as it had been unsettling 2 years ago. Their relationship had evolved beyond employer and employee into something more complex, partnership built on mutual respect and shared understanding of the world's darker realities. "You've come a long way from serving Osobuco," he observed, studying the plans over her shoulder. "Sometimes I miss it," Lily admitted. "The simplicity of that life, the clear boundaries between right and wrong. Do you regret accepting my offer?" Lily considered the question seriously, reviewing the past 2 years with the analytical framework she'd developed. The costs were undeniable, relationships damaged, innocence lost, blood on her hands whether she'd pulled triggers or not. But the alternative had been drowning slowly in student debt and professional frustration, dying piece by piece in a life that didn't utilize her potential. "No," she said finally. "I regret the pain my choices caused other people. I regret that Maya had to be traumatized because of my work, but I don't regret using my education for something meaningful, even if the meaning is morally complicated." "Good," Ethan replied, "because I have something to show you." He led her to his private office, unlocking a safe she'd never seen opened before. Inside were documents transferring partial ownership of several legitimate businesses into her name: real estate holdings, import-export companies, investment portfolios worth millions. "You've earned a stake in the empire," Ethan explained, "not just as an employee but as a partner. These holdings give you independent wealth and security regardless of what happens to me or the organization. You've proven yourself exceptional, Lily, This is recognition of that achievement. Lily stared at the documents, understanding what they represented. Financial independence beyond anything she'd imagined, built on 2 years of moral compromise and exceptional work. The final transformation from someone who worked for criminals into someone who was criminal, who profited directly from an empire built on violence and fear. She thought about the studio apartment with its broken shower, about serving osobuco while her degree collected dust, about the person she'd been who dreamed of using her education for something that mattered. That person was gone, transformed entirely by choices made and consequences accepted. In her place stood someone powerful, wealthy, morally compromised, and genuinely satisfied with work that challenged every skill she possessed. Someone who'd lost innocence but gained capability, who'd sacrificed conventional morality for pragmatic effectiveness, who'd chosen survival and excellence over safety and stagnation. Lily signed the documents accepting her stake in Ethan's empire, her hand steady. There was no going back to who she'd been, no undoing the transformation the past 2 years had wrought. Only forward, deeper into a world she'd learned to navigate with exceptional skill. That evening, she had dinner with Maya at a quiet restaurant far from the expensive establishments where Lily conducted business. Her sister was thriving in medical school, the financial support allowing her to focus on education without the stress that destroyed so many students. Their conversation was careful but genuine, a relationship rebuilt on acceptance of uncomfortable realities. "Are you happy?" Maya asked suddenly. "With this life you've built?" Lily considered the question, searching for honest answer. Happy felt wrong. Happiness suggested uncomplicated contentment she'd never achieve. But satisfied? Challenged? Fulfilled in ways she'd never been serving tables? "Yes," she said finally. "In complicated ways I couldn't have predicted. Yes." Maya nodded slowly, understanding if not approving. "Just promise me something. Promise that you'll stay you underneath whatever else you become. That the person who warned a stranger about danger, who tried to recommend mercy when she could have recommended death? Promise she's still in there somewhere." "I promise," Lily replied, hoping it was true. They finished dinner in comfortable silence, sisters connected by blood and history despite the chasm of choices that separated their lives. When they parted, Maya hugged her longer than usual, a gesture that felt like forgiveness or acceptance or simply acknowledgement of reality. Lily returned to her penthouse overlooking the city she'd helped Ethan control, poured bourbon she'd learned to appreciate, and stood at the windows watching Chicago's lights twinkle beneath her. Somewhere in that city, people were making choices that would determine their futures, accepting opportunities that would transform their lives, crossing thresholds they didn't fully understand. She'd been one of those people 2 years ago, a waitress who'd warned a customer about danger and stepped into a world that had reshaped her entirely. The transformation had cost more than she'd anticipated and given her more than she'd imagined. She'd lost innocence and gained power, sacrificed conventional morality, and discovered exceptional capability. Whether that made her extraordinary or broken, exceptional or corrupted, Lily couldn't say with certainty. Probably both, existing simultaneously in the gray areas where most real life actually happened. But she was here, standing in a penthouse she'd earned through skills applied brilliantly, if questionably, drinking bourbon that cost more than her old weekly wages, reviewing plans to expand an empire she partially owned. She was challenged, fulfilled, morally compromised, and genuinely engaged with work that utilized every capability she possessed. The waitress with the psychology degree would barely recognize the woman she'd become. But that waitress had been drowning slowly in a life going nowhere, dying piece by piece under the weight of unrealized potential. This version, morally flexible, exceptionally capable, deeply embedded in criminal enterprise, was at least alive. Was using her education, making decisions that mattered, existing at a level of professional challenge she'd always craved. Lily finished her bourbon, set down the glass, and returned to the expansion plans waiting for her review. Tomorrow would bring new assessments, new decisions, new opportunities to exercise skills she'd spent 4 years developing and 2 years refining in the hardest school imaginable. She'd chosen this path deliberately, with full awareness of its costs. And standing in her penthouse overlooking the city, Lily Stanton, criminal consultant, strategic partner, exceptional analyst of human behavior, allowed herself to feel something disturbingly close to pride in the person she'd become. Not because that person was good in any conventional sense, but because that person was capable, powerful, and fully alive in ways the struggling waitress had never been. And in the end, Lily had learned being fully alive, even in morally complicated ways, mattered more than being simply good while slowly dying inside. She picked up her tablet, opened the expansion plans, and got back to work. There was an empire to run, and she'd earned her place in running it. The story of how Lily Stanton had saved a stranger's life and lost her innocence was complete. But the story of who she'd become and what she'd build with the power and capability she'd gained was just beginning.